I hope you guys are doing well. So yesterday we discussed the entire national income accounting. Of course, we are running against time. The target is to cover everything in 4 days. तो हो सकता है आज का सेशन हमारा थोड़ा और लंबा चले. Yesterday's session we had to wind up at around 2 p.m. But today we'll try and take a break and then have another session or continue the same session for a longer time period. Okay. आज हम लोग इन्फ्लेशन से स्टार्ट करेंगे. पास्ट ईयर पेपर्स का एनालिसिस हम लोगों ने कल कर लिया था, तो we don't have to go and look for past year papers yet again. But what we need to do is take forward other topics. तो इन्फ्लेशन से स्टार्ट करेंगे. इन्फ्लेशन के बाद मनी पे आएंगे, फिर अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट पे आएंगे, एज यू कैन सी हेयर. फिर फिस्कल पॉलिसी पे आएंगे, पब्लिक डेट, फिस्कल पॉलिसी, फेडरल फाइनेंस. ये तीनों चैप्टर्स कनेक्टेड हैं. इन तीनों को साथ में कवर करेंगे. ठीक है. Give me a thumbs up if everything is fine. We will begin first with inflation. सबसे पहले हम inflation से start करेंगे. So what exactly is inflation? Inflation is nothing but a fall in prices of goods and services over a period of time. Now you must say, or you might be thinking, so what do we mean when we say fall in prices of goods and services over a period of time? It's very simple. You go to the market, you have 50 rupees in your pocket, you go to a doodhwala and you say, give me 1 liter milk, and he says, okay, 50 rupees is enough, take this mother dairy milk, 1 liter. This is yesterday. You go today again and you have the same amount of money, 50 rupees. You again ask the doodhwala 1 liter milk, and he says, not possible anymore. 1 liter milk of mother dairy now costs 60 rupees, not 50. So what has happened? There is a fall in, there's a rise in prices of goods and services and a fall in purchasing power of money. So two things are happening at the same time, or there are two different ways of saying the same thing. Either we can say there is rise in prices of goods and services, or we can also say that there is a fall in purchasing power of money. Now you might say, so what do we mean when we say fall in purchasing power of money? Rise in prices, we've understood. From 50 rupees per liter, the price of milk has risen to 60 rupees per liter. That means rise in prices of 1 liter of milk. But let's say you don't have 60 rupees. So you go to the doodhwala again and you're like, okay, 50 rupees I have, 60 rupees I don't have. What is the possibility? The milkman says, you want 1 liter milk, but you don't have 60 rupees. I can give you 800 milliliters of milk. So I can give you less for the same amount of money that you have. 50 rupees. Yesterday you could buy 1 liter. Today you can buy only 800 ml of the milk. So what is happening here? There is a fall in purchasing power of 50 rupees. Yesterday 50 rupees could get me 1 liter milk. Today 50 rupees can get me less, only 800 ml of milk. So there's a fall in purchasing power of money. So we can say both are the same things. Either we can say there's a rise in prices of goods or services, or there's a fall in purchasing power of money. That is what is mentioned here, nothing else. यहाँ पे यही सारी चीजें लिखी हुई हैं. Okay. Causes of inflation. Now inflation is here. There are multiple causes of inflation. There are multiple impacts of inflation. There's no single cause and effect, as I had told you yesterday, that in physics, chemistry, biology, you might work like this. There is a cause, and that cause results in an impact, in an effect. But that single line relationship often does not work when we're dealing with economics, because we're dealing with human behavior as well. We're dealing with psychology. We're dealing with behaviors of people. So therefore, a lot of changes keep happening. So there are multiple causes of anything happening, and there are multiple impacts or effects of whatever happens, and the same happens in the case of inflation. There are multiple causes behind inflation. Anything might trigger inflation in an economy. Inflation is so beautiful because you can't see it, you can't feel it. If it is in control and you feel that there is no inflation, where is inflation? But when it goes too high, when it starts pinching you and your pocket, then you realize, oh, the inflation is so high. Okay, something that happened in real estate, something that happened in gold, you must have read about it. Gold, everybody thought it's not going to rise, it's not going to rise. After COVID, it went up from 28 to 30 to 35, 40, 50, 55, 60. Everybody said now it's not going to rise, no inflation anymore, but it kept on rising. The price of gold kept on rising. What is this? An example of inflation in gold. The same has happened in the case of real estate. But let's talk generally about inflation in an economy. Overall inflation क्यों बढ़ता है या क्यों घटता है, क्या होता है ऐसा? Increase in money supply. Simple example. Today, let me pick up the same example. You went to the milkman and you said, I have 50 rupees, give me 1 liter of milk. You go to him every day. After some days, he's like, bro, the price of milk has increased 50 rupees. I can give you only 900 ml. And you're like, okay, give me 900 ml. I don't have any more money. And you keep going to him, and after a while, he's like, okay, take 950. And after a while, okay, he take 1 liter of milk because you're a loyal customer and you don't anyways have more money. But let's say you have more money. Let's assume that you have more money, or let's assume that there's an increase in money supply in the economy. What will happen in that case? In that case, instead of 50, you have 100 now. You will go to the milkman and you will say 1 liter, 2 liter of milk, and he will say, bro, I can't give you 2 liter. It's become expensive now. I can give you 1.8 liter now. And you're like, okay, take another 20 rupees. I have so much money in my pocket, I can't even count it. There is a increase in money supply in the economy, which ultimately goes to who? Goes to people's pockets. Money supply increase का मतलब क्या होता है? More money in the hands of the people. When people have more money, they start demanding more. They don't care so much about money anymore because they have so much of it in their pockets, and that results in inflation. The value of currency goes down, inflation starts going up. I hope that's clear. Therefore, RBI keeps money supply under tab at all times because they understand that if money supply increases beyond a certain limit, then people will start feeling that they have too much money in their pocket. They will start spending like there's no tomorrow. And what will happen then? Inflation in the economy. Something that the government is trying to do. They're trying to increase money supply in the economy. Can you tell me how are they trying to increase money supply in the economy? Can anyone tell me how is the government trying? Recent initiative, the government has been trying to increase money supply in the economy very recently. Let me wait for the answer. Ravi Mitra says MCQs of previous year questions. We picked them up yesterday. We can't pick them up every day. We picked up previous year questions of 2023 yesterday. Okay. Okay, can anyone tell me what is it that the government has done recently to increase money supply in the economy? GS3 2.0, what is the government trying to do? The government is saying we are not going to tax you as much as we were taxing you before. Ultimately, what's the outcome? When we don't tax you enough, you have all this money at your disposal now. It's with you. You can spend it the way you want to spend it. So that is how the government said, let's increase money supply in the economy. Therefore, which will result in an increase in demand for goods and services. That is what we need at the moment. Okay. Second reason behind inflation in an economy, deficit financing. Deficit financing means when the government starts borrowing money in order to spend that money, and those expenditures are mandatory, the government has to do it. Let's say the government has to make some salary payments. You end up working for the government tomorrow. You have to have your salary at the end of every month. The government says, we don't have this money, but we have to pay you, so let me borrow. So when the government starts borrowing money for expenditures, not for investments, but for expenditures, then there are high chances that there will be some kind of inflation in the economy. Why will there be inflation in the economy? Because when the government borrows, then the government puts in more money, number one, in the hands of the people, because the government is borrowing and then giving it to the people in the name of expenditure. And secondly, the government might also decide to do it through printing of new currency. That is what the government normally wants to do, because print करने में उनकी कोई liability create नहीं हो रही है. So instead of borrowing, if the government decides to print more currency and then spend it on people, spend it for its expenditures, then automatically when you're printing new currency, you're increasing money supply in the economy. More money supply in the economy means what? It means inflation in the economy. Very simple. Okay. Let's come to the next one. Increase in expenditure. When the government starts spending too much, we are borrowing for expenses, but we're assuming, or we're not talking about the amount of expenses. But in the third one, let's say the government says, let's go all out and increase our expenditures like there's no tomorrow. Let's spend. The government decides to spend a lot of money in the economy for whatever it wants to spend its money on. When it does that, automatically what will happen? When the government is spending money, somebody is going to earn. The government is not going to just throw that money around. Somebody is going to earn that money, right? Somebody, it will be an income of some person. When it becomes income of someone, because it's the expenditure of the government, then ultimately what will happen? There will be more money supply in the economy through more incomes amongst people. And what will that do? More demand. What will that do? More inflation in the economy. Can you tell me an example of a government scheme which was focused on increasing government expenditures after the global financial crisis of 2008? Very simple. I've talked about this before as well. After the global financial crisis of 2008, the government came out with a scheme which was focused on reviving demand in the economy. Can anyone tell me what was that? ऐसी कौन सी स्कीम थी? What was the name of the scheme that the government launched after global financial crisis of 2008? Wonderful, Vimal. Yes, MG Narega was that scheme. What was the objective? To put in small amounts of money. Now, all of that was government expenditure, and one of the criticisms was that the government is paying people to dig holes, right? There are so many memes and so many videos on YouTube about that. But the government said we are paying people at the lower end of the pyramid. सबसे गरीब आदमी को हम लोग पैसा दे रहे हैं 100 रुपए 200 रुपए 50 रुपए दिन का. He's going to go out and demand. When he goes out and demand, then automatically the economy will come up again, because at that time we were facing suppressed demand in the economy. But what was the outcome? Another outcome was higher inflation in the economy. Yes, we witnessed some growth, but with growth comes inflation. That is the most tricky part. Rise in administered prices. What are administered prices? Prices that are controlled by the government. The government controls the prices of MSP, minimum support price. But MSP now has become market support price, not the minimum support price. It has changed its nature. It was supposed to be minimum support price, so it was supposed to be a minimum price that was guaranteed to a farmer, but instead of minimum, now it has become market support price, because it's often more than the price of the same good in the market. That is a problem. So when the administered or controlled prices rise too much in the economy, they they end up pushing the entire system up. For example, wheat. Let's say the market price of wheat as per demand and supply should be 1000 rupees per quintal. But the government says we want to pacify the farmers. For us, the MSP is 1500 per quintal. What will happen? The farmer will say, I'm going to sell to the government. Why will I sell in the market? Because the MSP is so high. The market says, okay, from tomorrow we are also ready to buy from you at 1500 per quintal. What has happened? There is inflation in the economy, sudden rise in the prices of wheat in the economy. Why has it happened? Because of rise in administered prices. This is what happens. I've given you the example. Next one, rising import prices. The best example is oil. And this specifically happens in the case of necessary goods. Whenever there are some goods or services which are necessary, which you need as a nation, which you need as an individual, you need oil. Without oil, nothing can happen. Without oil, you can't cook. Your mother can't cook at home. Without oil, you can't travel. Without oil, you can't go to your exam center and take the exam. How will you go? Will you go on a bullock cart? Up to you will not find that also. So what has happened? Because of a rise in import prices of oil, the entire economy inflates because everything is dependent on oil, right? No matter what you buy, what you eat, what you drink, what you see, what you're streaming right now, you're sitting on YouTube, everything, energy that you're using, everything is run by oil or some of its, complements. It's ultimately oil, all of it is oil. So when the prices of oil goes up, everything goes up. Whenever the price of everything goes up, there is inflation in the economy. Okay, so these are the major causes behind inflation. Okay, we might do impacts of inflation as well later in the chapter if we don't do it by yourself as well. Very important. There can be conceptual question around inflation. That is what has happened in the past as well. Okay. आगे चलते हैं टाइप्स ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन many types of inflation 12 13 14 you can take you can create all different kinds of different types of inflation as well. There are many minor types, major types. Let me cover the major types. There is cost push and then there is demand pull inflation. Cost push inflation happens when the cost of products goes up. Let me give you an example, connect it with this one out here. The fifth reason behind inflation was rise in import prices. For example, oil. So when the price of oil goes up, what will happen? My cost of production will go up. For example, although I'm not directly dependent on oil for my services, but to a certain extent I am also. For example, the price of oil goes up immediately tomorrow. What will happen? Because energy is not just coal, energy is not just nuclear, energy is not just solar, it is also dependent on byproducts of oil to a very large extent, natural gas. Okay, so what will happen? Energy prices will go up. Let's say I was buying electricity at, let's say, 10 rupees per unit because I'm sitting in a commercial setting. Tomorrow it becomes 15 rupees per unit. What has happened? My cost of running the operations, running my office has gone up by 50%. I was paying an average, let's say, electricity bill of, let's say, 20,000 per month. Now I'm paying 30 per month. So what has happened? The cost of my operation has gone up. When the cost of my operation goes up, what will I do? I will increase the price of my course, right? The price of my course will go up and I'll be like, I can't bear this expense. My cost has gone up. Let me increase the price of my course so that I can take care of my margins. So what has happened? Ultimately, because of a rise in price of oil, you have to pay more as a consumer. Ultimately, the consumer has to pay more. When the consumer has to pay more, what do we say has happened? Inflation has happened in the economy, nothing else. Okay. But cost is not the only reason. There is also a demand pull inflation in the economy that might happen. What is demand pull inflation? When the demand of goods and services is too much, that is demand pull inflation. Very beautiful example, Apple products that you see right now. What is that demand pull inflation? Okay, what is the government trying to do? The government gave GS3 2.0 reforms. What were these reforms? These reforms were focused or are focused on increasing demand of goods and services in the market. That is what the government wants to do. And the government also wants to reduce the cost of various goods and services. That is how it wants to increase demand in the market. So instead of trying to increase cost, it wants to reduce cost of the final consumer. Let's say the GST that I pay right now is 18%. Let's say the government says tomorrow all educational institutions, including coaching centers, coaching institutes, you pay only 5% from tomorrow, not 18. What will happen? Ultimately, you will pay less. So because of a fall in the cost of my good, my service, ultimately you have to pay less. You will start demanding more. You will start demanding more during that time period. Demand pull inflation can be because of a lot of reasons. There can be limited supply which results in higher demand, or they can be just higher demand कि यार डिमांड ही ज़्यादा है किसी सामान की. फॉर एग्जांपल अमूल, अब अमूल के दूध की डिमांड ही इतनी ज़्यादा है तो इन्फ्लेट होता ही रहता है प्राइस. एवरी नाउ एंड देन द प्राइस कीप्स राइजिंग अप. पनीर हैज गॉन अप. It's a new fetish of people. People love to have paneer. People who can't eat chicken want to feel like they're eating chicken, so they want to eat paneer. So what has happened there? Demand pull inflation has happened there. The demand has gone up. Okay, there are two more things here: deflation and disinflation. There is inflation, there is disinflation, and then there is deflation. Inflation means 1 liter of milk 50 rupees to 60 rupees. This is inflation. Okay. Disinflation may you need three numbers. 1 liter of milk was 50, then it was 60, now it is 65. What has happened? 50 to 60. How much increased? 20%. 60 to 65. How much increased? 10%. So from 20% rise, now inflation has risen by 10%. This is disinflation. Inflation is still not zero. The price is still rising, but it is rising at a lower rate. Deflation is complete shutdown. 50 to 60, now it is 55. It was rising by 20%, now it is falling by 10%. It is negative. The moment inflation becomes negative, it is deflation. If it is still positive but lesser than before, it is disinflation. If it is still positive, increasing, whatever, it is inflation. Okay, I hope that's clear. That's the difference between deflation and disinflation. We have then headline inflation and core inflation. Very simple. Core inflation, we just remove two articles. We remove food and we remove fuel from calculation of inflation. Whatever index we use in order to calculate inflation. Okay, let me simplify it further. Let's say you are the Prime Minister of India and you want to calculate inflation in the economy. You want to calculate inflation. You are like, okay, I'm too concerned about the people. Let me first find out what is the true actual level of inflation in the economy. What will you do? Will you go around trying to check the prices of all the goods and services in the economy? केला कितने का है, सेब कितने का है, आलू कितने का है, प्याज कितने की है, चाय पत्ती कितने की है, शुगर कितने की है? Will you do that? No, you won't do that. You can't do that. It's just not possible. You will get tired after a day. You will probably a month. You will be able to catch it on, but then you'll be like, oh, to heck with it. I have to do so many things. I can't keep going around trying to find the prices of all the goods and services. There are millions of goods and services in the market. So what will you do? You will ask your advisor what to do because you don't know. You're not educated enough. Your advisor will say, okay, let me create a basket. Let me create a basket. In this basket, let me put certain goods and services. Whatever you want, I'll put in here. Okay, let me put certain goods and services in here. And we try and measure the change in prices of these goods and services. And based on that, we declare that this is the inflation of the entire economy. But you are like, oh, this is fraud because these goods and services are not the only goods and services in the economy. But then your advisor says this is how economics works. Okay, this is how economics works. ऐसे ही चलता है काम, आपको सर्वे के बेसिस पे ही करना पड़ेगा. There is no other way. You're like, okay, fine, let's do that. Now, two kinds of inflation measures have created, headline and core. Again, you go to your advisor and you say, what is the inflation right now? Your advisor says 11%. You say, this is too high. How can we reduce it? Your advisor say, let me give you a shortcut. If we remove food and fuel from this basket, if we remove food and fuel from this basket, that this inflation comes down to 4%. And then you ask, why do we remove food and fuel? Your advisor says, because they're too volatile. They keep changing. Right now it's raining outside. The price of food is going to go up. Right now US is going mad, Trump is going mad, the price of fuel is going to go up in the economy. So because food and fuel are so volatile as measures of inflation, we don't want them to artificially keep impacting inflation at all times. Therefore, let's remove them and then find out what is the real inflation in the economy. Headline is everything. Headline is everything. Core is you remove food and fuel. That's very simple. That's all there is to it. Okay, nothing else. I hope it's clear. Give me a thumbs up if it's clear, then we'll move forward. Let me know if it is clear, then we'll move forward. आगे चलते हैं. The next one is imported inflation. What is imported inflation? Very simple. When your inflation is getting imported from outside of India, that is imported inflation. Now, why and how can inflation get imported from outside India? The best example is oil. We import 85% of our oil needs. Whenever prices of oil goes up, prices of everything in the economy go up. But this rise in price is not made by us. This rise in price is not our fault. It is the fault of oil. And we are importing all this oil. And because we have to import all this oil, we can do nothing about it. And therefore, we have to live with a higher inflation in the economy. Okay. There can be various other examples as well. We import a lot of stuff nowadays. Fertilizer is one. We are trying to be self-sufficient in fertilizer, but we still import a lot of fertilizer. So whenever the price of fertilizer goes up in the international market, the price of fertilizer goes up in India. When the price of fertilizer goes up in India, the price of food goes up in India. Why? Because farmers have to use these fertilizers in order to grow. Because the cost of fertilizer has gone up, ultimately they're going to pass on this rise in price to whatever they sell. So the price of food goes up in the economy. That is imported inflation. It's not our fault, but if you are too dependent on imports, then you have to live with it. That is why no country wants to have too many or too much of imports, because then they start losing control, and they don't want to lose control of their own economy. They want to be in control of their own economy. This gives rise to something called as mercantilist policy. Okay, read about it, write it down somewhere. Mercantilist policy. This was a policy which ran before World War I. Every country wanted to follow a mercantilist policy. Read about it. You will have more clarity as to how does it work and how all the countries were obsessed with exports at that time. Even now they're obsessed, but at that time they were too obsessed with exports. Nobody wanted any kind of imports in their economy. Okay, let's move forward. What are the implications? I think you can read it by yourself. It's very simple. Okay, let me just spend some time on this. Implications of imported inflation only, not other kinds of inflation. Only imported inflation. What are the implications of that? Reduced purchasing power of consumers when importing goods and services like fertilizers or oil, when their prices are rising, because these are necessary imports. This happens only when there are necessary imports and their prices are rising. If there's a luxury import, its prices are rising, nobody cares. You stop importing that good altogether. But when you have to import that good, which means it's a necessary import, and its prices are rising, necessary import prices are going up, what will happen? I will spend a major portion. This is a sign of percentage. In economics, you try and convert as much as possible stuff into percentage. You try and convert as much data into percentage as possible. When you do that, your understanding is much better. Okay, it automatically converts itself into ratios. That automatically gives you a lot of power. So what is happening? Let's say my income is 50,000 per month, something that I told you yesterday. We stick with the same example. My income is 50,000. I was spending 5,000. That means 10% I was spending on oil and gas for my car, for conveyance. Oil prices have shot up. Now I'm spending 20% on oil. So what has happened? My purchasing power has gone down. I now have less money to to spend in the economy, right? I can't save much, I can't invest much, I can't uh, consume much. I'm spending too much money on oil because the imported price of oil has gone up. So the purchasing power of consumers go down. Inflation rate increases in the economy. Again, oil. If the price of oil goes up, price of everything goes up. What will happen in the long run? Same example. My salary is 50,000. I'm spending 10% of oil. Now I'm spending 20% on oil. I'll go to my boss and I'll say, boss, my costs have gone up. I'm spending too much money on too many necessities. Please increase my salary from 50 to 70. Your boss says 60. You are fine. You have increased your salary. So what has happened? Inflation will start increasing in the economy because the cost now for the company has gone up. The cost of company to have you work for them has gone up. When their cost goes up, their final price goes up. Inflation will start increasing in the economy. As I told you before, yesterday as well, today as well, there is no single cause and effect relationship in economics. In economics, if this is the center point, there are multiple causes, multiple impacts. Some impacts are related with causes, some causes are connected with impacts. So it's always a web-like structure that we see. There is no single reason for everything. It is all connected. Just like the matrix, it's all connected. Let's go forward. Effect on trade balance. When inflation goes up, automatically the trade deficit goes down. Now you might say, sir, how did this happen? This is very confusing. Let me explain. You were importing oil. You cannot import oil in rupees. You have to pay in dollars, right? And dollars you can't print, so you have to earn dollars. Just like me and you, we can't print money. If we could print money, we would stop working. We cannot print money, so we have to earn. You also are working to earn. You're studying to earn. Similarly, India cannot print dollars, so it has to earn dollars. Let's say it earned $1 million in a year through exports. But all of this money went into oil imports because the oil prices shot up. So it has to spend a lot more money on oil imports in terms of dollars, not in rupees. Nobody wants rupees, everybody wants dollars. So now all this money has gone into oil imports. What has happened? My trade balance is going to get affected because the cost of my import has gone up. Let's say yesterday I was paying 500,000 or 5 lakh dollars in oil imports, and the rest I was paying in other imports. But today I'm spending $1 million on oil imports, and I still have to spend 5 lakh dollars on other imports. But I'm earning only $1 million, so I have to borrow. I'll have to borrow this 500 million from somewhere. I'll have to borrow this 500 million from somewhere. That is nothing but my trade balance getting affected. I'm earning less dollars, but I have to spend more dollars, so I have to borrow dollars from somewhere or the other. Okay. Whenever there is a rise in imported inflation, it's also a monetary policy challenge. Why? Because it is out of control of monetary policy. The RBI can't do anything about oil. If the price of oil goes up, RBI can do very little. It has very little control over what it can do in order to control that inflation, control that kind of situation. Therefore, it becomes a tricky situation. Okay, I hope this makes sense. This is clear. Let's move to the next one. The next one is stagflation. Stagflation, very simple. Only three terms involved. There is economic growth, there is inflation, and there is unemployment. Now, if you remove unemployment, this is normal growth and inflation dynamics. Whenever economic growth goes up, or whenever a country wants to increase economic growth, inflation automatically increases. That is why RBI or the central bank and the government often used to have fights between themselves. Right now they don't. Somehow they're very, adjusting and able to understand each other. I don't know what's the core reason behind that. But you go 10 years back, Every day in the newspaper, you will see that the RBI and the government are fighting with each other. RBI says something else, the government wants something else. RBI says we want to increase, uh, we want to reduce inflation in the economy, therefore we are increasing rates, and the government says no, no, please don't do that. It will affect economic growth. Growth is too slow. Therefore, they always used to fight, but now they don't. I don't understand why they don't. They should be fighting. Why they should be fighting is whenever economic growth goes up, whenever you try to increase economic growth, then as an outcome, automatically inflation also tends to increase in the economy. Okay. So if you want to control inflation, what happens? Economic growth also starts going down. You never want to push economic growth down, but it is an outcome, it is an externality of you trying to control inflation in the economy. Okay, that is a normal, a very natural, universal kind of relationship between growth and inflation. Now let's come to stagflation. Stagflation is a situation where somehow economic growth has gone down, so inflation should also have been down, but we're stuck in a situation where inflation has gone up. So if we try to control inflation, economic growth goes down even further. We get into a recession. If we try to push economic growth up, inflation goes up further. We move into an hyperinflation scenario. That's why it's a tricky situation. So economic growth is low, inflation is high. We're stuck there because if we push this down, this also goes down. We push this up, this also goes up. We are screwed. At the same time, there's another variable here which is also getting affected. Unemployment is also increasing. Why is it increasing? Because economic growth is going down. Whenever growth goes down, people do not have enough jobs, and that is why unemployment starts increasing in the economy. That is why stagflation is a tricky scenario. You never want to be stuck in stagflation. There are multiple, or there can be multiple causes behind stagflation. This is not an exhaustive list. There can be a number of reasons, but this is just an indicative list. Okay, these are the reasons that can be behind stagflation in the economy. Supply shock theory says, it says due to a sudden disruption in the supply of any service or any commodity, there can be a sharp increase in the prices, overall prices in the economy. Oil again, we keep coming back to oil, but we can't do anything without oil. We can't understand economics also without oil. Here, 1973, classic example. Okay, 1989, classic example. These two time periods, oil supply was disrupted. As soon as we saw oil supply getting disrupted, what happened? Major economies went into recession, which means their economic growth went down and their inflation started going up. Okay, so whenever the supply of a necessary commodity without which you can't do anything, uh, its supply is affected, then automatically you see growth going down and you see inflation going up. Ayushi has a question, and it's a very good question. The question is, how come inflation is high during slow economic growth? So again, no cause and effect relationship. The government was trying to do something, and in trying to do that, it was trying to push up economic growth. It was trying to bring inflation in control, but somehow it did something. Something happened that inflation started going up and growth started going down. We're witnessing this. We're witnessing this actually right now in our economy. If you look at the numbers closely, you will see that inflation is still high. RBI says that it is not, but I don't believe them. Look at the housing prices. Look at the housing prices. They're so high. Look at the prices of basic food. They just remove food and they say everything is under control. But majority of households in India are still dependent on these two things. They want a house, they want food, nothing else they need. So what is happening? Inflation is going up. The government over a period of time has been trying to push up economic growth, but in trying to push up economic growth, it took some steps, but those steps resulted in an increase in inflation in the economy. Now, this normally happens as soon as there is more inequality in the economy. This is a fundamental reason or cause behind countries getting stuck in stagflation scenario. What happens when there is inequality in the economy? Can anyone tell me? Then there are some people who are willing to spend a lot, okay, and there are too many people who don't have money, who can't spend anything, who can't spend anything. These people, these some people who have the ability to spend a lot, start pushing up prices. So inflation starts happening in the economy because of this inequality. Because these some people have so much money that they start pushing up prices of goods and services. But when there are too many people who can't spend, which means that either unemployment is high or people are earning too little, then economic growth starts going down. Ultimately, economic growth starts going down. A perfect example is Pakistan. Pakistan is a classic example of a country that has got stuck in this scenario for too long. Why? Because Operation Sindoor ke time pe you must have seen there are some people who are too rich, who have all kinds of amenities, all kinds of luxury cars, luxury houses, but there are too many people who are living on the roads, who are living almost in destruction. Okay, so supply shock theory is one, inequality is one, poor economic policies, जो मैंने अभी आपको बताया, poor economic policy resulting in inequality in the economy. So whenever any economy is not able to come out with an economic policy that works for everyone, automatically countries get stuck in stagflation. Okay, आगे चलते हैं. There are some inflation indices. There is CPI, there is WPI. These are the major ones. I think these are the facts that you can look at yourself later as well. National Statistical Office that is concerned with measuring inflation in the economy. The base year is 2012. We use an index called as Lasperis index. You just need to remember the name. It's nothing complicated, simple hai, Lasperis index. Total cost, the formula is total cost of fixed basket of goods and services in the current period divided by total cost of the same basket in the base period. Very normal. वो Lasperis ने निकाला तो Lasperis index नाम रख दिया, and it feels very complicated and very sophisticated, but it's not. Okay. The sequencing or the ranking is important here. So in measuring CPI index, as I said, there's a basket because the PM cannot go around the entire economy measuring the change in prices of all the goods and services. So his advisor said, let me find a shortcut. Let's create a basket of certain goods and services. Whatever change happens in this basket, we assume that it's happening in the entire economy. So this basket, 45% of this basket is food and beverages. 10% is housing. 6.8% is fuel and light. 6.5% is clothing and footwear. Okay. And 28% is miscellaneous. So you see, they put 28% in miscellaneous. This brings down CPI inflation also. And when you're trying to find core CPI inflation, you remove this as well. You remove this as well. You're left with almost nothing. You're left with this. You're left with just this and the miscellaneous part. That is why you keep saying inflation is in control, but in fact it normally or many times is not. Okay. CPI can also be calculated for different kinds of workers so that you feel and you are able to figure out how are these workers facing inflation, what kind of inflation are they facing in their own industries. So you have CPI for industrial workers, for agricultural laborers. These are only facts. You don't need to understand them because there is nothing else to understand. अलग अलग डिफरेंट काइंड्स के जो लोग हैं उनके लिए अलग अलग कंज्यूमर प्राइस इंडेक्स निकाल दिया है बिकॉज हर किसी की बास्केट अलग है. एन इंडस्ट्रियल वर्कर विल अर्न फ्रॉम समवेयर एल्स and will spend on a lot of different things that you normally would not, right? For example, I spend on all these kinds of technical stuff. स्टूडियो बनाना है, आईपैड लेना है, माइक लेना है, ये लेना है, वो लेना है. A normal person doesn't spend on these things. An agricultural laborer would be spending on stuff that I would not be spending any money on. तो हर एक का इन्फ्लेशन अलग होगा क्योंकि उनकी बास्केट अलग होगी, इसलिए उनके लिए अलग रखा हुआ है. देन वी हैव होलसेल प्राइस इंडेक्स. कल हमने डिस्कस किया था. दिस इज द प्रोड्यूसर. द प्रोड्यूसर सेल्स हिज स्टफ टू द डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर. द डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर sells his stuff to the retailer. The retailer sells his stuff to me finally. Wholesale is what is the price of goods and services. This is CPI. The amount of money that I am paying is CPI. Wholesale is here. Wholesaler or retailer, almost the same thing. You can also say distributor is the wholesaler, or you can say that there is another person here who is the wholesaler. Okay, so how much money is he paying for buying goods and services from the producer? That is wholesale price index. When you try and compare the change in prices at the wholesale level, that is the wholesale price index. Because लेट्स से आप लोगों ने शार्क टैंक देखा ही है. प्रोड्यूसर ने 5 रुपए की कोई चीज़ बनाई, 7 रुपए की यहाँ बेची, फिर वो 8 की आगे गई, फिर 8 की एकदम से 20 की हो गई वो. अब प्रोड्यूसर ने 5 की बेची थी, वो होलसेलर ने 8 की खरीदी थी. वो अल्टीमेटली कंज्यूमर इज पेइंग 20 फॉर इट. वी हैव ऑल सीन दैट. मार्केटिंग कॉस्ट आर ह्यूमंगस, actual production costs are very less. So wholesale price index tries to find the inflation in this arena. But the problem with the wholesale price index is the consumer is not paying that. The consumer is paying much more. So consumer might be facing much more inflation. That is why we have CPI separately. Okay. To figure out what is the inflation level at the consumer level, we have the CPI. Wholesale may be just like CPI. We have different articles, we have different divisions. Whole CPI में हमने देखा था food and fuel, housing, miscellaneous, और क्या था, एक दो चीज़ें और थी, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी था, एक दो चीज़ें और थी. WPI में भी we divided into three parts. We have manufactured products, we have fuel and power, and we have primary articles. Now the difference between WPI and CPI, one more difference is WPI में service नहीं आता है. No service is in the basket of WPI. Basket में हमने WPI में service नहीं डाला. I don't know why. Goods आता है. But in CPI you have both the goods and the services as a part of the basket. Okay. So in primary articles, probably because the services normally do not follow the same pattern. I'm the producer, I'm giving you educational service. You are the consumer, you're buying the educational service. There's no middleman here. Middleman है ही नहीं. Majority services में middleman कम होते हैं. That is why WPI probably does not have services. Okay. Primary articles, manufactured products, fuel and power. These are the three major components of WPI. Manufactured products have the highest weightage, 64%. Please remember the names of majority of these. There can be a question in the exam. वो आपको दे देंगे भाई, कोल है, बेसिक मेटल है, मिनरल है. कौन सा मैन्युफैक्चर प्रोडक्ट है, कौन सा फ्यूल एंड पावर है, कौन सा प्राइमरी है, आप कंफ्यूज हो जाओगे. राइट. So try and remember these, majority of these, because they're given in the official documentation given by the government of India. No, बहुत नॉर्मल सी बात है इसमें जो भी लिखा है. प्राइमरी आर्टिकल में क्या आता है? प्राइमरी आर्टिकल में मिनरल आएगा और फूड आएगा. ओके. सो फूड आर्टिकल, नॉन फूड आर्टिकल्स प्राइमरी. प्राइमरी मतलब जो ज़मीन से उगे हैं वो आएंगे यहाँ पर. नॉन फूड में कैश्यूज भी कैश क्रॉप में आता है तो वो भी आ जाएगा. मिनरल्स हो गया, क्रूड पेट्रोलियम हो गया. अब देखो, क्रूड पेट्रोलियम प्राइमरी में आएगा, बट जब ये क्रूड पेट्रोलियम फाइनली रिफाइन होके बिकेगा तो फ्यूल एंड पावर में चला जाएगा. ओके. सो फ्यूल एंड पावर एंड प्राइमरी आर्टिकल आर वेरी सिमिलर, बट दीज आर क्रूड और रॉ coming out from the earth, and these are refined. That is the major difference between these two. Okay. Manufactured is everything that is processed. Textiles processed. अब टेक्सटाइल कहाँ से बनता है? कॉटन से बनता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल जूट से बनता है. वो कॉटन जूट यहाँ पर आएगा, ठीक है ना. और जब वो टेक्सटाइल बन रहा है तो यहाँ पर आएगा. सो टेक्सटाइल, केमिकल्स, फूड प्रोडक्ट्स, ये सारे प्रोसेस्ड फूड. चिप्स का पैकेट यहाँ पर आएगा, पोटैटो इधर आएगा. ओके. पेपर एंड पेपर प्रोडक्ट्स, रबर एंड प्लास्टिक प्रोडक्ट्स, बेसिक मेटल, मशीनरी, anything processed, anything manufactured will come under here. Producer price index, normally not used in India much because it does not tell us a realistic picture, but PPI is producer level पे जो भी inflation हो रहा है उसको measure करने के लिए हम PPI का use करते हैं. Okay. RBI क्या करता है? RBI adopted the CPI, Consumer Price Index Combined Method in 2014 based on recommendations of Ujit Patel Committee, and since then we have been measuring inflation based on CPI, Consumer Price Index. Every 5 years, the government and the RBI sit together and decide what should be the range of inflation in the economy. Last time when we sat together, we said, okay, 4% plus minus 2%, that is our range of inflation. If inflation is 5% in the economy, RBI will try to bring it down to 4. If inflation is 3% in the economy, RBI will bring it up to 4. If inflation is 9% in the economy, RBI will try to bring it down to 4. Till 6%, RBI is not too concerned because that is the range. But as soon as it goes beyond 6 and beyond 2 here on both the sides, RBI has to take drastic measures to change inflation in the economy. So that is why instead of 1%, RBI said along with the government, let's create a range. This is our range, 2 to 6%. If inflation is within this range, we're still fine. The moment it goes beyond this range, we have to do something about it. Okay, so this is the target that RBI and the government together created. They revised it recently, they stuck with it again, they did not change it. Okay, RBI कैसे control करता है inflation? Just understand this because we're going to talk a lot about this in the future sessions. RBI का जो main control है वो है money supply. RBI can only control the amount of money that is being supplied in the economy. It can't do anything else. On the other hand, the government can only control demand of goods and services in the economy, nothing else. On its own, it can't control money supply in the economy, but it can control demand. So when there is too much of money supply in the economy, there will be inflation. We've seen that ऊपर देखा अभी हमने. When there is too little money supply in the economy, then inflation will be too less or zero or negative. It can go in the opposite direction. Similarly, when there is too much demand of goods and services, there will be inflation. But when the demand of goods and services is either in control or too little, then the inflation will come down. So the government tries to control inflation through demand, not demand of money, but demand of goods and services. Remember this, understand this, remember this, because that is what the government can do. How did the government last time push up demand for goods and services? Can anyone tell me? We discussed it above. हमने अभी 15-20 मिनट पहले देखा था. We did that through MG नरेगा. हमने MG नरेगा लॉन्च किया. हमने MG नरेगा लॉन्च करके बोला क्या? What was the objective? Our objective was let's give money to people at the lower pyramid so that they start demanding. When they demand, then they will go and buy stuff. When they start buying stuff, then automatically companies will produce. When companies produce, there will be employment in the economy. When that happens, there will be a healthy inflation in the economy. Okay, the objective at that time was to reduce unemployment, not to push up inflation, but that was also an outcome. RBI, what can RBI do? RBI can change money supply in the economy. By changing money supply, the amount of money being supplied in the economy, it can also control inflation. Let's say today morning you get up, you have 1,000 rupees in your pocket. You go to sleep, happy man, I have 1,000 bucks in my pocket. Tomorrow morning you get up, you see it's only 500. Where did the remaining money go? RBI comes out of your closet and says, we have taken the money from you, my friend. You can't have it. This is our money now. So what has RBI done? RBI has taken money out of your pocket. When RBI does that, what happens? There is less money. When there's less money, there will be less demand. When there's less demand, there will be less inflation. But at the same time, there will be lower economic growth as well, right? We've already understood that. RBI, how does it try to reduce or increase inflation in the economy? There are a lot of indirect ways, there are a lot of direct ways. We'll be talking about them when we talk about regulatory policy, but let's go through them very briefly here. RBI can change policy rates, and by changing policy rate, it can change inflation in the economy. Repo, reverse repo, bank rate, MSF, all these are policy rates. This is the primary policy rate. What is RBI doing? RBI does what does RBI do here? Very simple to understand, looks very complicated, nothing complicated about it. Okay, RBI says repo rate is not 5 anymore, it is 4% now. What is going to happen? Repo rate has gone down, which means now banks can borrow from RBI at 4%. Instead of 5%, banks can borrow at 4%. When the banks can borrow at a very cheap rate compared to before, then the banks are going to lend at a cheaper rate. They were lending at 9. Now they're saying let's lend at 8 because our cost of borrowing has gone down. So our lending interest rate can also go down. I am an investor, I am, let's say, a borrower, an entrepreneur who needed money, but 9% was too much for me. 8% is fine. I will go to the bank and I will be like, okay, give me a loan of 1 crore, 2 crore, 3 crore at 8%. I will give it back to you in 5 years' time. Or let's say I've just got placed in civil services exam, I've just cleared it. I want to buy a fancy car. I go to my bank and I say, okay, I want to buy a fancy car. I want to treat myself. Give me 10 lakh rupees. What is going to be the rate of interest? The bank says 8%. You're happy. 8% is too less. 9% seem too high. 8% is manageable. Okay, give it to me. So what has happened? Consumption has increased in the economy. Demand has increased in the economy. Money flow, money supply has increased in the economy. How? Because of a reduction in repo rate. So when the repo rate goes down, banks can borrow cheap. When banks can borrow cheap, they can lend cheap. When they can lend cheap, demand for money is going to increase in the economy. When demand for money and also supply of money increases in the economy, there will be inflation. If the RBI wants the opposite, what will it do? It will increase the repo rate from 5 to 6. It can do the opposite also. So now the banks have to pay more in order to borrow from RBI. And when it has to pay more, it will charge more. When it charges more, automatically demand for money and supply of money reduces in the economy. Very simple, very simple. Give me a thumbs up if you feel that you've understood it. Okay. Reverse repo rate is the opposite, the rate at which banks can lend to RBI. Okay, so when repo rate goes up or down, reverse repo rate also goes up or down in the same direction. Bank rate is the rate at which banks can borrow from RBI for the long term. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. If they want to borrow, they can borrow at bank rate. Reserve ratios, there are two reserve ratios, CRR and SLR. Reserve, why are they called reserve ratios? Because this is the amount of money that banks have to keep with RBI. Banks have to keep this amount of money with RBI. They have no other choice. It's a compulsory thing. So if you increase the reserve ratio, let's say RBI says instead of 4%, I'm increasing the cash reserve ratio to 10%. Banks say that okay, in the total financial year, entire financial year, I got 1 lakh rupees as deposit from someone. That is the entire business that I have. That means out of this 10%, 10,000 I have to deposit with you, and I'm not going to get any interest on this. Before it was 4,000, now it is 10,000. So now the bank has only 90,000 to be lent further. Because it has less money to lend further, what is going to happen? The total amount of money supply in the economy is going to reduce. With that, inflation also in the economy is going to reduce. Okay. Okay, open market operations. These are all tools that the RBI can use in order to control inflation. The most prominent ones being interest rate, repo rate. That is why it is also called as policy rate. So because monetary policy committee decides majorly this. Everything is dependent upon repo rate. Reserve ratios also help, but reserve ratios are not favored much. Why? Because they try to control the bank's lending power directly. Interest rates, repo rate tries to control bank's lending power indirectly. They're giving a signal to the market. The market can respond in any direction it wants, but this signal is a better way of trying to change inflation in the economy because it is more sustainable. When you try and twist someone's hand by telling them you deposit certain amount of money with me, then they might retaliate in the long run. open market operations. RBI can also try and reduce or increase inflation in the economy by open market operations, wherein RBI, what it does is, let's say RBI has some T-bills, treasury bills, or some government securities. There is too much money in the economy, too much money. Money supply बहुत बढ़ गया है, and RBI is frustrated here. We have to bring it down. What will RBI do? RBI will come out with uh, a policy where it says, okay, we are selling government securities worth 1 lakh crore. Whoever wants to buy can buy this piece of paper and give us, let's say, 10 rupees for one piece of paper. People are very enthusiastic about this because they're getting interest from this. People start investing, people start lending to the RBI for these government securities. RBI sucks all this money out of the system and keeps it with itself. This is called as open market operations. Okay. Yes, Ayushi, the difference between repo and bank rate is majorly of duration. RBI uses repo rate more. We will try and get into the details. There's something called as weighted average call rate here, but I don't want to get into that because it might get too technical. But for now, I think you can just understand it that, okay, the primary difference is uh, time period, nothing else. There are some other differences as well, but they're too technical for your understanding right now. Okay, not required. Selective credit control. Okay, wonderful. This is a very important. This is something that Dr. Raghuram Rajan used, recommended, in fact, not used, recommended before 2008 financial crisis. The RBI at that time period actually uh, heard him, used it, and that is how we could protect ourselves from the financial crisis. So what selective credit control means is, let's say RBI today says, if you're not aware, if you want to buy a house in Mumbai, in Delhi, in Chennai, recently I was talking to a banker and he was telling me, I was not aware about this. He told me if you're a woman, you can easily get 85 to 90% as a loan for house that you want to buy. For example, in some place like Mumbai, I want to buy a house for 5 CR, which is not a lot of money because Mumbai is going crazy. Then all I need is 50 lakh, 10%, and the remaining 4.5 CR I can take on loan. Okay, this is what's going on right now. What RBI can do tomorrow is RBI says, okay, let's change this policy. Now, not 80%, a maximum of 50% the bank can give as loan. 50% the person has to give his own money. We are not going to lend you that money. So now if a person wants to buy a house of 5 CR in Mumbai, uske paas he needs to have 2.5 CR of his own money, and then only he can take 2.5 as loan. What is going to happen? Very few number of people are going to buy a house now. Why? Because they don't have that kind of money. Who has 2.5 CR ready in his account available? Nobody has that kind of money. So what has RBI done? The RBI has selectively controlled the amount of credit in the economy through this one shot. That is called as selective credit control. If it does that, it reduces money supply in the economy. Okay, I hope this is clear. Last is flexible inflation targeting framework. What this means, it was launched in 2016. As I told you, CPI target is 4% plus minus 2%. It can change every 5 years. The government and the RBI sit together and they decide that let's have a range of inflation target rather than just one number, and that range is called as flexible inflation targeting, and the framework is called as FITF. I've already talked about this. I don't think we need to talk about it once again. Okay, so with this we come to the end of inflation. We've done almost everything related to inflation. We might have missed something, but that's okay. My objective is to cover majority of the stuff. Let's take a break of 10 minutes. We'll sit again, we'll talk about money, and then we'll move forward to unemployment, to fiscal policy, federal finance, public debt. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be very, very interesting. आपको खाना खाना है, चाय पीनी है, जो भी करना है आराम से करिए, बैठ के खाते खाते मुझे सुनिए, चाय पीते पीते मुझे सुनिए. It doesn't matter. All I need is your ears, nothing else. Okay, let's take a break of 10 minutes. We'll sit back again then. Okay, let's begin. Let's move on to our next chapter. The name of this is money. Money and inflation are connected because in inflation we talked about demand of money, supply of money, demand of goods and services. So it becomes important for us to understand how money supply in the economy is measured and how it can be changed, both of them. तो हम लोग यहाँ पर सबसे मेजर जो फोकस रखेंगे वो इसी चीज़ पे रखेंगे. वी आर गोइंग टू फोकस ऑन दिस ओनली. What are the features of money supply? How do you measure money supply in the economy? How do you change money supply in the economy? All of that we'll be concerned about. Before that, very briefly, we'll have a look at various functions of money. Money क्या क्या काम करता है आपकी ज़िंदगी में. बहुत बेसिक है, इसमें कुछ कॉम्प्लिकेटेड नहीं है. दो फंक्शंस मेजर होते हैं मनी के. जस्ट थिंक अबाउट इट फ्रॉम अ लेमैन्स पर्सपेक्टिव. यू टेक आउट मनी ऑफ योर, put it on the table and ask yourself, what does this do in my life? What kind of role does it play in my life? क्या क्या काम वो मेरे लिए करता है. There are primary functions and there are secondary functions that money carries out for all of us. Primary functions can be remembered through double M, secondary functions double S. What are primary functions? Medium of exchange and measure of value. What are secondary functions? Standard of deferred payments and store of value. दोनों को चारों को एक एक करके समझ लेते हैं. Medium of exchange means that anyone can buy anything by using money as the common medium of exchanging those goods and services. Let's say you go to the milkman and you say, I need 1 liter milk. The milkman says, what will you give me? And you say, I will give you 1 kg apples. And he says, I don't want apples. I don't eat apples. Give me something else. You don't have anything else. What happens? What is the outcome? You are unable to enjoy 1 liter of milk. Now you go to the same milkman and you say, I want 1 liter milk. I'm going to give you 100 rupees. The milkman says, wonderful. Money I can't refuse. Money is something that I can use anywhere I want. I value it. Give me 100 bucks. Let me give you 1 liter milk. So what has happened? Money has successfully become a common medium of exchange that you can use to buy anything, to sell anything. So it becomes very easy for you as a person to buy anything, sell anything using money as the medium of exchange. Okay. The second one is measure of value or unit of value. You're right, does everything except true happiness. To a certain extent it does, to a certain extent it does not. Try being a poor person. He might be happy, he might not be happy. It's a very subjective thing to say. But yes, money, a mentor of mine, I remember when I was interning, when I was in college, I asked him once, is money the best thing? If not, what is? He said, I don't know what's the best thing in the world, but I certainly know that money is next to the best thing. So if I don't know what's the best thing, let me focus on the second best. That was his perspective. Of course, intellect, knowledge, clarity, perspective in life, all those things matter equally with money. Money is not the only thing that's important enough. Okay. Second is measure of value. You can measure anything by using money. It is connected with medium of exchange. For example, here only you go to the milkman and you say, I need 1 liter milk. And he says, okay, 100 rupees. I take out 100 rupees, I give it to him. Done. The milkman comes to me and says, I need 1 kg bananas from you. I'm, let's say, a farmer, and I say, okay, 50 rupees, 1 kg banana. He says, done. You're able to exchange. So what has happened? Money is acting as a medium, a common medium of exchange, and at the same time, it is also helping in measuring the value of every good or service. The value of my service to a lot of aspirants is, let's say, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 worth of money that they're paying to me for providing them the course. So that is the measure of value of my course to them in their eyes. Okay. So money is acting at the same time. It is acting as a medium of exchange. If a student comes to me and he says, 1 kilo लौकी ले लो और मुझे course दे दो, I will not be able to do that. If he comes and says, take 2000, 3000, 4000, give me your course, I will be able to do that. So it's acting as a medium of exchange, and at the same time money is able to put a value on my service and on various other goods. So when money does that, it is able to put a value to various goods and services. We can say that it's a common unit of value or a measure of value. Okay. Secondary functions are standard of deferred payments. You don't want to pay today, you want to pay tomorrow. You can do that using money. Otherwise, you could not have done that. आप borrowing नहीं कर पाते, lending नहीं कर पाते. You want to buy a house today, ask your parents. Majority of us have bought houses on loan. लोन का मतलब घर आपने आज खरीद लिया, पैसा आप बाद में दे रहे हो. पैसा आप बाद में दे रहे हो मतलब मनी की वजह से ही वो हो पा रहा है. अदरवाइज इफ देयर वाज नो मनी यू कुड नॉट हैव डन दैट. ओके. And money is also a store of value. You can also store the value of your hard work in the form of money, value of anything else in the form of money. For example, when you start working tomorrow, आप 30 दिन काम करोगे, 30 दिन के बाद 31st डे पे या नेक्स्ट मंथ के फर्स्ट डे पे आपको सैलरी मिलेगी. What has happened there? You worked for 30 days and you've got a lump sum amount at the end of 30 days. So it's acting as a store of value. It is able to store the value of your contribution for 30 days and then you get paid for that in the form of money. Okay. It was not possible without money. उसके बिना नहीं हो पाता था. Okay. Let's come forward after having understood very basic functions of money, primary, secondary. They're very important. They can be asked in the examination. Past में भी questions वहाँ से आए हैं. Let's try and understand what is money supply and how exactly do we calculate money supply in the economy. Okay. Okay. If you want to calculate money supply, सबसे पहले कुछ divisions दिए हैं. The first is that we need to understand what do we mean when we say currency with the public. The total amount of money that is circulated in the economy, that is being used by the people in some way or the other, is called as currency with the public. On the other hand, there is demand deposits with banks. जो भी पैसा लोगों ने बैंक्स के अंदर डिपॉजिट के फॉर्म में डाला हुआ है, that is called as demand deposits with bank. Demand deposit मतलब it is withdrawable on demand. मैं अभी बैंक गया या मैंने अभी यूपीआई के थ्रू पैसा ट्रांसफर कर दिया, सो इट्स अ डिमांड डिपॉजिट. ओके. टर्म डिपॉजिट्स आर दोज डिपॉजिट्स जो आपने कुछ टाइम पीरियड के लिए डाला है. मैंने एक डिपॉजिट 1 साल के लिए फिक्स डिपॉजिट बना दिया, 2 साल के लिए फिक्स डिपॉजिट बना दिया, दैट्स अ टर्म डिपॉजिट. तो टर्म डिपॉजिट जो है वो मनी सप्लाई की कुछ कैलकुलेशन में नहीं आता है. अभी हम देखेंगे एक एक करके तो इट विल बिकम क्लियर. ओके. तो देयर आर 4 major measures of money supply: M1, M2, M3, M4. M1 is called as narrow money, M3 is called as broad money. M1, M2 दोनों को narrow बोलते हैं और M3, M4 दोनों को broad बोलते हैं. But right now the RBI uses M3 as the official measure of money supply. M1 is called as the narrow money and M3 as the broad money. M1 को narrow और M3 को broad क्यों बोलते हैं? Because M1 is the most liquid form ऑफ मनी सप्लाई. मतलब ऐसा जो एक्चुअल में लोगों के पास है एंड दे कैन यूज इट फॉर मल्टीपल पर्पसेस. M3 इंक्लूड्स अ लॉट ऑफ एलिमेंट्स ऑफ मनी सप्लाई दैट कैन नॉट बी यूज्ड बाय द पीपल इमीडिएटली. बिल्कुल लिक्विड नहीं है, लोगों के हाथ में नहीं है. इट इज़ इन्वेस्टेड समवेयर और द अदर. डिफरेंट काइंड्स ऑफ एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ मनी दैट आर नॉट अवेलेबल टू द पब्लिक, बट देर ऑल्सो पार्ट ऑफ मनी सप्लाई बिकॉज अल्टीमेटली वो इकोनॉमी के अंदर सर्कुलेट तो हो ही रहा है, लोग उसको यूज़ कर नहीं पा रहे हैं. दैट इज़ अ डिफरेंट थिंग. दैट इज़ वाई M3 की वैल्यू हमेशा ज़्यादा आती है, M1 की वैल्यू हमेशा कम आती है. ओके. सिंस 1977 4 मेजर्स हैव इवॉल्व्ड. M1 से स्टार्ट करते हैं. M1 इज द मोस्ट लिक्विड, एज आई सेड, दैट इज वाई इट इज कॉल्ड एज नैरो मेजर ऑफ मनी. M1 में क्या क्या आता है? टोटल करेंसी एंड कॉइन्स विद द पब्लिक, जो भी लोगों के हाथ में करेंसी है, दैट वुड बी कॉल्ड एज M1. प्लस डिमांड डिपॉजिट्स ऑफ कमर्शियल बैंक्स, जो भी मैंने पैसा मेरे हाथ में है, लेट्स से मेरे वॉलेट में जो कैश है, या फिर वट एवर मनी आई हैव पुट इन द बैंक एज अ डिमांड डिपॉजिट दैट आई कैन विड्रॉ वेन एवर आई वॉन्ट. इट्स नॉट अ टर्म डिपॉजिट, इट्स नॉट अ टाइम डिपॉजिट, इट्स जस्ट अ सिंपल डिमांड डिपॉजिट. तुम्हारे फादर के अकाउंट में लेट्स से आज 1 लाख रुपए सैलरी आई, उसमें से उन्होंने 20,000 रुपये तुम्हारी मॉम को दे दिए, 20,000 रुपये रेंट दे दिया फॉर एग्जाम्पल, 40,000 चले गए, 60 बचे। 60 में से उन्होंने 20 रख लिए अपने खर्चे के लिए, और बाकी एक्सपेंसेस के लिए, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी का खर्चा है, पानी का खर्चा है, गाड़ी का खर्चा है, और वो सारे खर्चे के लिए। एंड 40,000 ही इन्वेस्ट्स. So out of 1 lakh, what has he done? He's actually using 60,000 and he's keeping it in his account for a while. The remaining 40,000 he's investing. अब जब इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं तो ही इज नॉट गोइंग टू पुट इट इन डिमांड डिपॉजिट, या तो एफडी बनाएंगे या स्टॉक मार्केट में इन्वेस्ट करेंगे या गोल्ड खरीदेंगे. दे डू समथिंग लाइक दैट. So 40,000 will not be here in M1, but 60,000 till the time it is in my hands, or it is in the form of demand deposit in my bank account. I can take it out whenever I want. So this 60,000 will be measured, will come under M1 in money supply. Okay. अब ये 60 में से मैंने लेट्स से 20,000 रेंट दिया. वो जो रेंट वाला था अब ये उसकी हाथ में करेंसी हो गई, तो अभी भी M1 में है. जैसे ही वो रेंट वाले ने एफडी बनवाई इसकी, द रेंट वाला गाय सेज आई डोंट वांट टू स्पेंड दिस मनी, आई वांट टू सेव दिस मनी, मैंने एफडी बनवा देता हूँ हर महीने. As soon as this money moves to a fixed deposit account, automatically it moves out of M1. वो M1 में नहीं है, फिर वो उससे बाहर चला गया. Okay. All kinds of deposits with RBI. Now people like you and me cannot deposit anything with RBI. Only the banks deposit with RBI for short time period, not for long time period, for short time period. तो वो सारे deposit जो हैं वो भी M1 के अंदर आते हैं. समझ आ गया? This is the formula. तो these are the most liquid forms of money supply in the economy. M2 में हम M1 के आगे कुछ और चीज़ जोड़ देते हैं. What is that? सेविंग डिपॉजिट विद पोस्ट ऑफिस सेविंग बैंक. जो भी पोस्ट ऑफिस मतलब इंडिया पोस्ट का जो सेविंग बैंक है उसमें जो भी सेविंग डिपॉजिट्स होते हैं उसको हम ऐड कर देते हैं M1 में, तो M2 बन जाता है. सो दिस इज लेस लिक्विड. दीज आर डिपॉजिट्स बट दीज आर सेविंग डिपॉजिट्स, and these are not with normal bank, these are with post office savings bank, and these are also liquid क्योंकि saving deposit है, इसलिए M1 में ऐड करके M2 हमने बना दिया. ओके. Because saving deposits with post office saving bank are not withdrawable by check. Demand deposit की तरह ही है, बट ऐसा नहीं कि कभी भी निकाल लोगे. There are some limitations. That is why it is not a part of M1, इसलिए उसको हमने अलग से M2 बनाया है. फिर M3 इज अ ब्रॉडर मेजर ऑफ मनी सप्लाई, जहाँ पे हमने टाइम डिपॉजिट्स भी डाल दिए. सो टाइम डिपॉजिट्स लेस लिक्विड, फॉर एग्जाम्पल और योर फिक्स डिपॉजिट्स, योर फादर्स फिक्स डिपॉजिट्स, ऑल ऑफ देम आर टाइम डिपॉजिट्स. तो जब हम M1 में सारे टाइम डिपॉजिट्स ऐड कर देंगे तो हमें M3 मिल जाएगा, बिकॉज दिस इज लेस लिक्विड बट एट द सेम टाइम दिस इज मनी सप्लाई इन द इकोनॉमी, बिकॉज अल्टीमेटली दिस इज गेटिंग रोटेटेड इन द इकोनॉमी. मैंने बैंक को 10,000 रुपये की एफडी दी, बैंक उसमें से जो भी रिजर्व रेशोज वगैरह रखनी है उसके बाद लेट्स से इट कैन मूव फॉरवर्ड और लैंड फॉरवर्ड 8,000 रुपीज़, तो वो कर देगा 8,000 रुपये लैंड आगे. फिर वो 8,000 लैंड करेगा, दूसरे बैंक में जाएगा, दूसरा बैंक कैन लैंड 6,000. सो मनी सप्लाई इज इंक्रीजिंग इन द इकोनॉमी. हो रहा है ना इंक्रीज यहाँ पे, तो टाइम डिपॉजिट से भी इंक्रीज होता है मनी सप्लाई इन द इकोनॉमी. मनी मल्टीप्लाइज, बट इट इज नॉट अ पार्ट ऑफ M1, इट इज अ पार्ट ऑफ M3 बिकॉज इट इज लेस लिक्विड. ओके. फिर आता है M4 विच इज द लीस्ट लिक्विड. M3 में हमने जो भी पोस्ट ऑफिस सेविंग बैंक में सारे काइंड्स के डिपॉजिट्स थे, नॉट ओनली सेविंग डिपॉजिट्स, ऑल काइंड्स ऑफ डिपॉजिट्स, वो सब हमने ऐड कर दी, तो हमारा M4 बन गया. इट्स वेरी सिंपल, यू जस्ट हैव टू ट्राई एंड रिमेंबर इट. 2-3 बार पढ़ के याद रखना पड़ेगा, तभी वो एग्जाम में यूज कर पाओगे. एग्जाम में आ सकता है क्वेश्चंस यूज्ड टू कम फ्रॉम दिस एरिया वेरी रेगुलरली इन द एग्जाम. अभी कुछ साल से नहीं आया है, बट इट कैन कम. ओके. नाउ नेशनल सेविंग सर्टिफिकेट्स आर अ काइंड ऑफ investments that you make with post offices, and national saving certificates are not a part of your total deposits with post office saving bank. Why? Because national saving certificate is an investment that you are making, it's not a deposit. तो अगर इन्वेस्टमेंट को हम लेने लगे तो फिर सारे म्यूचुअल फंड इन्वेस्टमेंट, SIP सब आ जाएगा, बट वी डोंट डू दैट. ओके. तो इसलिए इन्वेस्टमेंट्स को हम यहाँ पे नहीं लेते. सो नेशनल सेविंग सर्टिफिकेट इज एक्सक्लूडेड. इफ देयर इज अ क्वेश्चन इन द एग्जामिनेशन, दिस इज वेयर दे कैन ट्रैप यू. दैट इज व्हाई आई एम टेलिंग यू इन एडवांस. ओके. मनी मल्टीप्लायर. So the concept of money multiplier was given by Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz in 1963. Money multiplier says एक बार मैंने डिपॉजिट किया बैंक में तो एक्चुअली में उसका इम्पैक्ट इकोनॉमी के ऊपर कितना पड़ेगा इन टर्म्स ऑफ मनी सप्लाई इन द इकोनॉमी, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज मनी मल्टीप्लायर. फॉर एग्जांपल, आई गिव a total 10,000 rupees to the bank. Okay, the bank is not going to keep this money with itself. The bank also wants to earn money. तो उसने जो भी रिजर्व रेशो है वो फॉलो करके 8,000 रुपीज़ आगे लेंड कर दिया. वो बैंक 2 के पास गया, सेकंड बैंक के पास गया, सेकंड किसी बोरोवर के पास गया, उसने बैंक में डाला पैसा या कहीं इन्वेस्ट किया, वो अल्टीमेटली बैंक के पास जाएगा पैसा. बैंक ने जो सेकंड बैंक था उसने रिजर्व रेशो हटा के 6,000 आगे लेंड किया. इट गोज़ टू बैंक 3. बैंक 3 ने फिर रिजर्व रेशोज़ वगैरह हटा के 4,000 लैंड किया. फिर बैंक 4 ने रिजर्व रेशोज़ वगैरह हटा के 2,000 आगे लैंड किया. इट विल कीप हैपनिंग टिल द टाइम इट बिकम्स ज़ीरो और नियर ज़ीरो, है ना. तो ये एक्चुअल मनी इन द इकोनॉमी दैट आरबीआई हैड इंट्रोड्यूस्ड वाज ओनली 10,000. आरबीआई ने 10,000 रुपया प्रिंट किया था, बट अल्टीमेटली ये मल्टीप्लाई होता गया, बढ़ता गया ये इकोनॉमी में. नाउ दिस गाय सेज आई हैव 2,000 रुपीज़, दिस गाय सेज आई हैव 4,000, this guy says I have 6,000, this guy says I have 8,000, this guy says I have 10,000. Everyone has this money, but actually it doesn't exist. So this happens because of the concept of money multiplier, where money keeps getting multiplied because of the banking system. Okay, how do you calculate that? Total legal reserve ratio आप सबसे पहले figure out करते हो. Yes. तो बैंक ने जो भी रिजर्व्स रखना है, जैसे कि स्टैट्यूटरी लिक्विडिटी रिजर्व, कैश रिजर्व रेशो, एनी अदर काइंड ऑफ रिजर्व, वो सब हमने 1 अपॉन LRR का फॉर्मूला लगाया. वाई 1 अपॉन? बिकॉज द मोर द रिजर्व्स द लेस लिक्विडिटी इन द सिस्टम. फॉर एग्जांपल, मैंने बैंक को 10,000 दी है, टोटल रिजर्व रेशो था 20%. ओके, सो द बैंक कैन lend further 8,000. दूसरा सिचुएशन, आई गिव बैंक 10,000, टोटल रिजर्व रेशो वाज 50%. In this case, the bank can lend forward only 5,000. So the more the legal reserve ratio, the less money multiplication there is. That is why we put LRR in the denominator and not in the numerator. ठीक है, तो जितना ज़्यादा LRR होगा उतना कम हमारा multiplication होगा. फॉर एग्जाम्पल LRR यहाँ पे 20% है, तो मनी मल्टीप्लायर हमारा हो गया 5, 1 अपॉन 20%. इसको हम कैलकुलेट करेंगे 5 है. दैट मीन्स if RBI is printing 10,000 rupees, then ultimately it will result in 50,000 rupees worth of money supply in the economy, because money is getting multiplied here because of the concept of money multiplication through banks. So ultimately the system will see an increase in money supply of 50,000 rupees in the economy, and not 10,000, because of this concept of money multiplication. Okay, I hope this is clear. Okay, there's another concept of velocity of money, but I want to discuss this because it's too complicated. I'm not expecting any question from this area. It's too difficult. Okay, so let's remove this. Let's move forward. Okay, let's move to the next chapter. यहाँ पे कोई doubt है तो बताइए, otherwise we'll move to unemployment now. Any doubt till here? You can express that, anything that you want to say. Have you guys understood what is money? What is money supply in the economy? How is it measured? We will talk in detail about how RBI controls inflation and controls money supply in the economy in the future sessions when we talk about regulatory bodies. तो हमारा I think 9th 8th chapter is regulatory bodies. As you can see here, there are 4 parts to it. It's very exhaustive and there are questions from this area, so we'll talk about this as well. Okay. Okay, let's move to the next chapter. Ayushi is asking how LRR से money multiplier आ गया. LRR is the total reserve ratio. So for example, if RBI says of RBI ने सबसे पहले तो 10,000 रुपया प्रिंट किया और प्रिंट करके इकोनॉमी में डाल दिया. Then RBI says to the bank that whatever money you have to keep 20% with us. and you can only lend 80%. So first बैंक के पास 10,000 आया, then this bank can lend only 8,000 because money multiplier is because LRR is 20%. Okay. Now अगर हम एक्चुअली ये 20% करते जाएंगे तो ये हमें एक सर्टेन नंबर देगा, 10,000 प्लस 8,000 प्लस 8 का 80% कितना हो, 6,400, है ना। फिर इसका 80% एक्स कुछ आएगा, ये हमें एक अल्टीमेटली एक सर्टेन नंबर देगा. दैट सर्टेन नंबर इज टोटल अमाउंट ऑफ मनी सप्लाई इन द इकोनॉमी बिकॉज ऑफ 10,000 एक्स्ट्रा प्रिंटिंग दैट आरबीआई हैज डन. तो आरबीआई ने तो एक्चुअली 10,000 प्रिंट किया था, बट वो अल्टीमेटली इट रिजल्टेड इन सर्टेन अमाउंट ऑफ रुपीज इन द इकोनॉमी. ये यहाँ तक क्लियर है. नाउ एल आर आर इन दिस केस इज 20%. तो हमने एक फॉर्मूला बनाया कि भाई मनी मल्टीप्लायर सीधा निकाल लेते हैं rather than calculating it in such a complicated manner. 1 upon LRR is money multiplier, which means 1 upon 20%, which gives us 5. 20% है तो 1 upon 20 into 100 हो गया. So this gives us 5. Okay, which means money multiplier is 5. So this means that if RBI is printing 10,000 extra rupees in the system and then it is lending to the bank, and then that bank is lending further, and then that bank is lending further, और ये चलता जा रहा. Ultimately this is going to result in this total amount of money supply increase in the economy is going to be 50,000. 10,000 into 5, because 5 is money multiplier here. Okay. Asta is asking, NBFC में deposits को भी investment consider किया जाता है? I don't think so. एक तो NBFCs do not take demand deposits, NBFCs take only time deposits, and those time deposits I don't think they are considered as investment. They should be considered as normal deposits. Okay, because you can not take it out whenever you want, but the amount of interest that you're getting out of it through those deposits are certainly much lesser. They're not investments, they're actually deposits only. If any NBFC is taking any money in the form of an investment product or a tool, NBFC ने आपको बोला मैं ये एक म्यूचुअल फंड बना रहा हूँ, उसमें आप डिपॉजिट कर दो पैसा, then it is not a deposit, it's an investment that you're making, so that will not be considered. Okay. NBFCs normally take only time deposits. They're not allowed to take demand deposits. Let's move to unemployment. हम लोग सबसे पहले unemployment को basic definition देखेंगे. We'll try and understand different types of unemployment. That is going to be the most important types of unemployment in India. There are 8-9 types of unemployment. We'll try and understand nature of unemployment and employment in India. Exactly India में हो क्या रहा है. Important terms related to unemployment. This is very important. There's a survey, periodic labor force survey. It is given in the course. Please go through that as well. We are not covering periodic labor force survey out here. Yes, it's not mentioned here, but periodic labor force survey के latest numbers become very important for you. Periodic labor force survey talks about employment and unemployment only. Measurement of employment looks difficult at times. It's a little complicated, but we will try and understand it as much as possible. उसके बाद छोटी छोटी चीज़ें, फिलिप्स कर्व टाइप की चीज़ें हम देख लेंगे. Okay. There are two things that clarify or help us define employment, unemployment in India. It's very simple. First of all, we consider people from the age group of 15 to 60 years. तो कोई 15 साल से छोटा बच्चा है और एम्प्लॉयड है तो उसको हम एम्प्लॉयमेंट की कैटेगरी में नहीं डालेंगे, बिकॉज ही इज लेस देन 15 एनीवेज नॉट अलाउड टू वर्क. If a person above 60 years is working, we will not consider them in labor force, workforce, employed, unemployed. हम कैलकुलेशन में डालेंगे ही नहीं उनको. तो जब हम कैलकुलेट करते हैं the number of people who are unemployed or employed, we are concerned with people between the age group of 15 and 60. We are not concerned beyond that. Okay. दो चीज़ें देखी जाती हैं. A person who is willing to work, a person who is able to work. If a person is not willing to work, for example, you guys not willing to work, okay, You guys want to prepare for the exam. Right now, if somebody offers you a job, if I offer you a job, you will not work. What is that? You're able to work, you're very much able, but you're not willing right now. Okay. But a person who's willing to work and who's able to work, only he or she will come under the category of whether he is unemployed or employed. Okay. So any person who's not willing or who's not able, anyone is not satisfied within the age group of 15 to 60 automatically goes out of the category of employment unemployment. उसको हम हटा ही देते हैं, उसको हम कैलकुलेशन में डालते ही नहीं है फिर. ठीक है, उसका भी क्लैरिफिकेशन नीचे और अच्छा मिलेगा. अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट कैन बी वॉलंटरी और इनवॉलंटरी. वॉलंटरी अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट वो होता है जो काम करना ही नहीं चाहते, जैसे कि आप लोग अभी काम नहीं करना चाहते, यू वांट टू स्टडी and you want to work down the line if you get this job, but you don't want to work at the moment. Yeah, some of you might be working, that's very good if you're doing that, but people who are right now able to work, who have the capacity to work, who are in the age group of 15 to 60, but right now they're not working, they're not willing to work, वो voluntarily they've decided to not work, that would be called as voluntarily unemployed, but they're not considered part of unemployed population. So all the civil services aspirants, all the EPFO aspirants, whoever is watching this, you're not a part of India's unemployed. Actually, you're not. That is why the government is also not concerned about you, because they know that you're not going to mess up with their numbers, because you're anyways not a part of total unemployed category, unemployed ratio in the country, because you're voluntarily unemployed, you're not considered unemployed anymore. Okay. And then there is involuntary unemployment, when people are actually willing to work but they're not able to find employment. That is, so they're involuntarily unemployed, they want to work, they're willing to work, they're in the age group, they will do whatever comes forward according to their qualifications, but they're not able to find that. Now this is something that we see happening a lot in our country, and this majorly is happening because of skill gap. The industry wants something else, people have something else. The industry says, it happens with me also, the industry says we want a person who's highly skilled, we want a person who can speak good English, we want a person who's good at maths, we want a person who's analytical, who have understanding of problem solving. But people don't know about these things, they've not been taught about these things. Even now we are reading all these economics and all. How is it going to help us in our life? Not much. Okay. What is going to help us more is an analytical thought process, so that we can understand how to take decisions. हमारी decision making better हो सके. Something that helps us with maths. We know skills. For example, Excel आता है हमें, AI आता है. Those kind of things are going to help us land jobs and going to help us work well wherever we are going to work. Okay. So that is all involuntary unemployment. You want to work, you're willing to work, but because of skill gap or any other reason, you're unable to find that suitable match. Okay. Underemployment is when you're working, but आपकी skill या education utilize नहीं हो रही है. Best example is PhD candidates who are filing to work as peons in UP and Bihar. What is that? Underemployment. आपकी औकात ज़्यादा है, but आपको वो काम मिल नहीं रहा है, तो आप जो मिल रहा है वो उसमें खुश हो, या फिर वो करने की सोच रहे हो कि आज जो मिल जाए वो कर लेते हैं, बिकॉज जो हमें आता है उसके कॉरेस्पॉन्डिंग तो हमें नौकरी मिल नहीं रही है. ओके ओके, देर आर सर्टन टर्म्स हेयर विच आर इम्पॉर्टेंट. अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट पढ़ेंगे अभी हम नीचे, जब हम उसको कैलकुलेट करेंगे तो ये टर्म्स हमें काम आएंगे. फर्स्ट इज लेबर फोर्स. लेबर फोर्स इज टोटल एम्प्लॉयड प्लस टोटल अनएम्प्लॉयड इन द कंट्री. ये दोनों को मिला देंगे तो हमारा लेबर फोर्स बन जाएगा. सो टोटल नंबर ऑफ पीपल हु आर एम्प्लॉयड इन द कंट्री प्लस टोटल नंबर ऑफ पीपल हु आर अनएम्प्लॉयड, दोनों को अटैच कर दिया तो लेबर फोर्स बन गया. ओके, टोटल नंबर ऑफ पीपल हु आर available as labor in the country is called as labor supply. workforce ये थोड़ा कॉम्प्लिकेट हो जाता है. लेबर फोर्स याद रखिएगा, एम्प्लॉयड प्लस अनएम्प्लॉयड इज लेबर फोर्स. टोटल नंबर ऑफ पीपल एंगेज्ड इन एम्प्लॉयमेंट इज वर्कफोर्स. वर्कफोर्स इज बेसिकली एम्प्लॉयड पीपल ओनली. तो लेबर फोर्स में हमने एम्प्लॉयड अनएम्प्लॉयड देखा था, ये एम्प्लॉयड वाला जो है ये वर्क फोर्स हो गया हमारा. ओके, सो टोटल पीपल, नंबर ऑफ पीपल हु आर एंगेज्ड इन एम्प्लॉयमेंट, सम काइंड ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट बिकम्स आर वर्क फोर्स. यहीं से निकल के आता है लेबर फोर्स पार्टिसिपेशन रेट. लेबर फोर्स वाज एम्प्लॉयड प्लस अनएम्प्लॉयड, ई प्लस यू या ई यू. So labor force is EU, total unemployed and employed upon total population in the economy becomes our labor force participation rate. On the other hand, workforce participation rate is workforce is what? Employed. Employed upon total population is workforce participation rate. Okay. अब नॉर्मल सी बात है, लेबर फोर्स वॉज ई प्लस यू, वर्क फोर्स वॉज ई, माइनस करेंगे यू बचेगा विच इज अनएम्प्लॉयड people in the economy. Unemployment rate is total number of persons who are unemployed upon total labor force. So this is different from workforce. How? Because unemployment rate is U upon E plus U into 100. So understand this. Okay. Workforce was total employed in the economy was workforce, but unemployment rate is U upon E plus U into 100. सिंपल है, मैथमेटिकल है, बहुत सिंपल मैथ्स के थ्रू आप याद रख पाओगे. और प्रोपोर्शन ऑफ अनएम्प्लॉयड इज टोटल नंबर ऑफ. अब देखिए, दिस इज हाउ अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट रेट एंड प्रोपोर्शन ऑफ अनएम्प्लॉयड इज डिफरेंट. अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट रेट क्या बोलता है? यू अपॉन ई प्लस यू, राइट, विच इज नॉट द टोटल पॉपुलेशन. दिस इज एम्प्लॉयड प्लस अनएम्प्लॉयड पीपल. Proportion of unemployed is U upon total population. So total population of India is 140 crore. But out of that, how many people are employed and unemployed? Probably let's say 10 crore people are employed and another 10 crore are unemployed. The remaining are not a part of our workforce. हमारे workforce का part ही नहीं है. Because either they are like you, willing, not able to work, or they are above 60 or they are below 15, right? So here the denominator is 20 crore, here the denominator is 140 crore. That is what differentiates it. तो proportion of unemployed and unemployment rate दोनों अलग अलग हैं, और unemployment rate इसलिए काफ़ी कम आता रहता है बिकॉज नीचे पॉपुलेशन नहीं है, नीचे लेबर फोर्स है. आई होप दिस इज क्लियर. यहाँ तक क्लियर है तो बताइए, गिव मी अ थम्स अप एंड देन वील मूव फॉरवर्ड. तो ये कुछ मेजर्स थे अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट के. प्रोपोर्शन ऑफ अनएम्प्लॉयड, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट रेट, नंबर ऑफ पर्सन्स अनएम्प्लॉयड, वर्कफोर्स पार्टिसिपेशन रेट, बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट है, लेबर फोर्स पार्टिसिपेशन रेट. व्हेन यू रीड द पीरियोडिक लेबर फोर्स सर्वे, वहाँ पे ये सारे बार बार टर्म्स आएंगे, तो कन्फ्यूजन नहीं होना चाहिए, इसलिए ये परसेंटेजेस इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाते हैं. अब हमने देख लिया अलग अलग टाइप के प्रोपोर्शंस, अलग अलग टाइप के मेजर्स. बट इनको मेजर कैसे करेंगे? इनको मेजर करने के अलग अलग तरीके हैं. देर आर 4 different methods to measure unemployment rate in India. There is the usual principal status, usual principal and subsidiary status, current weekly status and current daily status. बहुत सिंपल है, दिखने में बड़े कॉम्प्लिकेटेड लगते हैं. द मेजर डिफरेंस इज टाइम. सब में जो मेजर डिफरेंस है वो है टाइम का. यूजुअल प्रिंसिपल स्टेटस बोलता है 1 साल. यूजुअल प्रिंसिपल सब्सिडियरी स्टेटस भी बोलता है 1 साल, बट उसमें कुछ चेंजेस कर देता है. करंट वीकली स्टेटस बोलता है 1 हफ्ते में कितने एम्प्लॉयड थे, अनएम्प्लॉयड थे. और करंट डेली से स्टेटस बोलता है डेली के बेसिस पे कितने एम्प्लॉयड थे, अनएम्प्लॉयड थे. सो यूजुअल प्रिंसिपल स्टेटस विल गिव अस द लीस्ट परसेंटेज ऑफ अनएम्प्लॉयड. क्यों भाई, क्यों देगा वो सबसे कम? अभी बताता हूँ. And current daily status will give us the max percentage of unemployed. तो करंट डेली स्टेटस हमें मैक्स देगा अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट रेट, और यूजुअल प्रिंसिपल स्टेटस हमें लीस्ट देगा अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट रेट. बट ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है? क्योंकि लेट्स से जोमैटो डिलीवरी बॉय है, उसने डिलीवरी में काम किया 2 महीना, बढ़िया. 2 महीने के बाद उसको निकाल दिया फॉर सम रीज़न. वो 2-3 महीने के लिए गांव चला गया, फिर वो वापस आया, फिर 2 महीने उसने स्विगी में काम किया, टोटल 4 महीने काम कर लिया. फिर स्विगी से कुछ प्रॉब्लम हुई, निकाल दिया, फिर वो गांव चला गया 2-3 महीने के लिए, फिर वो वापस आया, फिर उसकी लगी जॉब ब्लिंकिट में उसने फाइनली 3 महीने काम किया. तो एक फाइनेंशियल ईयर में उसने 3, 2, 5, 2, 7 टोटल 7 मंथ्स के लिए काम किया. तो जब हम यूपीएस देखेंगे तो हम बोलेंगे यार इस आदमी ने 6 महीने से ज़्यादा काम किया है, तो इसको डाल दो एम्प्लॉयड कैटेगरी में. Although this guy, we have to understand that although this guy was not working for 5 months out of 12 months, so that should have been measured or calculated or considered, but we are not considering that because under usual principal status we say if a person has worked for more than 6 months in a financial year, then we say that he is employed. So because this person, although he is struggling, he's worked for more than 6 months in a financial year, we just conclude that he was employed in the entire year. We just conclude that. उसको employed की category में डाल दिया हमने. So because what we are doing, we are increasing the number of people we assume to be employed. Therefore, the number of people who are unemployed, that becomes least. वो कम होता जाता है. ऑन द अदर हैंड वी हैव करंट डेली स्टेटस. करंट डेली स्टेटस में हम लोग उल्टा करते हैं. हम बोलते हैं आज काम किया कि नहीं किया, कल काम किया कि नहीं किया, इस हफ्ते में काम किया कि नहीं किया. सो एवरी वीक अ पर्सन हु इज नॉट वर्किंग according to this method in a certain week on a daily basis, if he is not able to work, we'll declare him as we declare that person as unemployed. So what are we doing on a weekly or daily basis? We are changing the number of people who are unemployed and employed. What that does is that increases the number of people who are declared as unemployed in a financial year. क्यों? क्योंकि हम डेली बेसिस पे ऐसे बंदे को भी पकड़ रहे हैं. ये जो जोमेटो वाला बंदा था, उसने जब बीच में 2 महीने काम नहीं किया, when he was jobless, he would be considered unemployed here. फिर उसने बीच में 2 महीने काम और नहीं किया, he would be considered unemployed here. फिर लास्ट के 2 महीने भी खाली बैठा था, he would be considered unemployed here. Okay, so for 5 months he would be considered as unemployed. For 7 months he would be considered as employed under current daily status. But under usual principal status for the entire financial year he has been declared as employed. That is why this reduces automatically the number of people who are calculated as unemployed, and this one increases the number of people who come under the category of unemployed. I hope it is clear. Give me a thumbs up if it is clear and we'll move forward. बिकॉज अभी जब हम नीचे फॉर्मूलाज देखेंगे तो थोड़ा सा कंफ्यूजिंग लग सकता है. ओके, ओके. सो यूपीएस यूजुअल प्रिंसिपल स्टेटस टॉक्स अबाउट 1 ईयर. एक साल में आपने कितना टाइम काम किया. इफ यू वर्कड फॉर मोर देन 6 months, if you are employed or unemployed for less than 6 months, they're not counted in the labor force. One second, guys. ओके, इसमें एक और चीज़ आ जाती है. लेट्स से जोमेटो वाला ही हम एग्जांपल लेते हैं. हमने 1 ईयर पीरियड लिया एक तो सबसे पहले तो, और एक और चीज़ हम इसमें यहाँ पर देखते हैं. लेबर फोर्स में हमने देखा था लेबर फोर्स इज employed plus unemployed. E plus U is labor force, right? So if a person is not willing and not able to work for less than 6 months, so this Zomato guy, he worked for let's say 4 months, he remained unemployed for let's say 1 month, and the remaining time period he went back home. थक गया वो ढूंढ ढूंढ के और वो घर चला गया वापस. So here in this time period he is not looking for work, he is not working, so he's for less than 6 months, for 5 months he is employed and unemployed, less than 6 months, है ना. But for 7 months he is not even looking for work. तो इस बंदे को हम लेबर फोर्स से बाहर ही निकाल देंगे. Another example, the same guy, Zomato guy, Now this time the Zomato guy was working for let's say 4 months. For 3 months he was looking for work but he was not able to find work. ढूंढ रहा था इधर उधर बेचारा मिल नहीं रहा था उसको. But then he got tired and he went back home again. And for 5 months he stayed at home not looking for work. घर ही चला गया वो. So he was a part of labor force for 7 months because he was unemployed for 3 months, employed for 4 months. Because he was a part of the labor force for 7 months and he was not looking for work for 5 months, because this is more than 6, now we are going to assume that he's a part of labor force. I hope this is clear. Okay. फिर हम उसके आगे जाते हैं. Employment is assessed over a 1 year period. If someone is employed or unemployed, let's say for more than 6 months, तो हमने उसको लेबर फोर्स में डाल दिया. जैसे हमने उसको लेबर फोर्स में डाल दिया, तब हम देखेंगे कि भाई मेजर टाइम पीरियड के लिए वर्किंग था या नॉन वर्किंग था. वर्किंग था तो एम्प्लॉयड और नॉन वर्किंग था तो अनएम्प्लॉयड. ओके, आई होप दिस इज क्लियर. यहाँ तक क्लियर है. लेबर फोर्स, not workforce, employed plus unemployed, labor force. Second is usual principal and subsidiary status, which is 30 days. Anyone who has worked for less than 30 days in a year is considered a subsidiary worker under the UPSS. This category has a broader scope compared to UPS. ये बंदा है, सेम बंदा, उसने जोमेटो डिलीवरी में 4 महीने काम किया. जोमेटो डिलीवरी के अंदर 4 महीने काम किया. उसने एक साल में 30 दिन से ज़्यादा काम किया. एनी पर्सन हु इज़ वर्कड फॉर एटलीस्ट 30 डेज इन अ ईयर इज कंसिडर्ड एज अ वर्कर. उसको हम फिर लेबर फोर्स में डाल देंगे. लेबर फोर्स मतलब अनएम्प्लॉयड या फिर एम्प्लॉयड, दोनों की कैटेगरी जो कंबाइन होकर हम बनाते हैं. सो दिस पर्सन, एज सुन एज अ पर्सन has worked for more than 30 days, he's become a part of the labor force. Here, if a person has not worked for 6 or more than 6 months, then he's not a part of labor force. है ना. जैसे ही बंदा 12 महीने से में से 5 महीने काम करता है, 7 महीने काम नहीं करता है, एंड इज नॉट इवन लुकिंग, तो ऑटोमेटिकली वो लेबर फोर्स में से बाहर चले जाता है. जैसे बंदा लेबर फोर्स से बाहर चला गया, वैसे ही ऑटोमेटिकली ही इज आउट ऑफ कैलकुलेशन ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट और अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. बट यूपीएसएस में 30 डेज का रेफरेंस पीरियड है, एक साल की जगह. तो अगर किसी ने एक साल में 30 डेज के ऊपर काम किया, सो दिस इज़ वेरी पॉजिटिव. द फर्स्ट वन इज़ वेरी नेगेटिव. जैसे ही बंदे ने 30 डेज से ज़्यादा काम किया, ही इज़ बिकम पार्ट ऑफ द लेबर फोर्स. फिर आता है वीकली स्टेटस, जिसमें हम एक वीक लेते हैं इंस्टेड ऑफ 1 ईयर. देखो यहाँ पर भी 1 ईयर है, बट आप देख रहे हो कि 1 ईयर में से 30 डेज एटलीस्ट ही शुड हैव वर्कड. यहाँ पर भी 1 ईयर है, बट वी आर सेइंग इन दैट 1 ईयर पीरियड ही शुड हैव वर्कड फॉर एटलीस्ट 6 मंथ्स. 6 महीने के लिए ही शुड हैव ईदर वर्कड और ही शुड हैव बीन लुकिंग फॉर वर्क, है ना. यहाँ पे खाली वी आर कंसर्न अबाउट पीपल हु हैव वर्कड फॉर एटलीस्ट 30 डेज. लुकिंग फॉर वर्क डजंट मैटर. बट वीकली स्टेटस में द रेफरेंस पीरियड चेंजेस फ्रॉम 1 ईयर टू 1 वीक, एंड इवन इन डेली स्टेटस द रेफरेंस पीरियड इज 1 वीक ओनली. तो दोनों पीरियड्स में, current weekly status and current daily status, the reference period is 1 week in both the calculations. current weekly status में क्या बोलेंगे हम बोलेंगे इस एक हफ्ते में आपने क्या किया. if a person has worked or is looking for work for at least 1 hour on any day of the week, let's say ये वाला हम वीक देख रहे हैं. अब इस वीक में मैं हूँ, मैं 5 दिन कुछ काम नहीं किया, मैं ढूंढ भी नहीं रहा हूँ काम, आराम से घर पे बैठा हूँ, चिल कर रहा हूँ. छठे दिन मुझे खुजली हुई, मैंने बोला यार बाहर जाके काम ढूंढते हैं, तो मैंने काम ढूंढना शुरू किया. एज सुन एज आई स्टार्ट लुकिंग फॉर वर्क, आई एम सीकिंग वर्क, और फिर मैंने 4-5 घंटे काम ढूंढा, so that automatically I will be considered as either employed or unemployed. तो मैं कहाँ चला जाऊँगा, लेबर फोर्स की कैटेगरी में चला जाऊँगा. as soon as I either work or I am seeking work for at least 1 hour in that week. Okay, so first May to 7th May की बात कर रहे हैं, मैं आई एम लुकिंग फॉर वर्क इन स्विगी, तो मैं लेबर फोर्स का पार्ट बन गया फॉर दैट वीक ओनली. ओके, दिस इज करंट वीकली स्टेटस. हम स्टेटस फिगर आउट करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि ये आदमी लेबर फोर्स का पार्ट है कि नहीं है. फिर आता है करंट डेली स्टेटस। इसमें हम रेफरेंस पीरियड इज 1 वीक ओनली, बट वी आर डिवाइडिंग दैट 1 वीक ऑल्सो इन मल्टीपल डेज। तो हम बोल रहे हैं कि किसी एक दिन में अ डे सेगमेंटेड इनटू हाफ एंड फुल इंटेंसिटी, तो 1 वीक का रेफरेंस पीरियड है। लेकिन अब मैं किसी इंसान को ये नहीं बोलूंगा कि उसने 1 साल के लिए, एक दिन के लिए, 1 घंटे के लिए ही वॉज लुकिंग फॉर वर्क, सो इज अ पार्ट ऑफ लेबर फोर्स इन दैट वीक। आई विल नॉट जस्ट से दैट, आई विल नाउ ट्राई टू फाइंड आउट कि उसने कितना टाइम उस एक हफ्ते में कितने घंटे काम किया, कितने घंटे काम नहीं किया। ओके, इफ अ पर्सन इज वर्किंग फॉर 1 or more hours बट लेस देन 4 hours, तो मैं उसको बोलूंगा ये हाफ इंटेंसिटी वर्कर है। तो अगर किसी वर्कर ने उस एक वीक में 1 घंटे काम किया और 4 घंटे से कम काम किया, तो मैं बोलूंगा वो हाफ इंटेंसिटी वर्कर है। और अगर उसने 1 और 4 से ज़्यादा काम किया, 1 घंटे से ज़्यादा और 4 घंटे से ज़्यादा काम किया, तो मैं बोलूंगा उसको फुल इंटेंसिटी वर्कर है। तो जैसे ही मैंने डिवाइड कर दिया फर्दर एक वर्कर को कि ये हाफ इंटेंसिटी वर्कर है, ये फुल इंटेंसिटी वर्कर है, तो मुझे और क्लियरली पता लगने लगेगा कितने लोग अनएम्प्लॉयड हैं, कितने लोग एम्प्लॉयड हैं, कितने लोग लेबर फोर्स का पार्ट हैं। वो और ज़्यादा मैंने उसको मैग्नीफाई कर दिया। ओके, तो जो सबसे पहला था यूजुअल प्रिंसिपल स्टेटस, वो लोएस्ट एम्प्लॉयमेंट एस्टिमेट देता है, और ये ऐसी अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट दिखाता है जो क्रॉनिक है। क्रॉनिक है मतलब जो बहुत ज़्यादा डीप है एक इकोनॉमी के अंदर, क्योंकि एक आदमी 5-5, 6-6 महीने तक खाली बैठा है, काम नहीं कर पा रहा है ना। ऑन दी अदर हैंड जो करंट डेली स्टेटस है वो क्रॉनिक तो बता ही रहा है, बट एट द सेम टाइम इंटरमिटेंट अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट भी बता रहा है। ऐसी अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट जो कैजुअल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट है वो भी हमको बता रहा है करंट डेली स्टेटस। यूजुअल प्रिंसिपल स्टेटस हमको वो नहीं बता पा रहा है। ओके, सिंस द 11th 5-year प्लान अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट सर्वेज हैव अडॉप्टेड करंट डेली स्टेटस अप्रोच, ये याद रखिएगा। और सबसे ज़्यादा एस्टिमेट अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट का करंट डेली स्टेटस देता है। आयुषी सिंह, कैसे पता लगेगा समवन इज सीकिंग वर्क और नॉट? सी ऑल दीज कैलकुलेशंस आर बेस्ड ऑन सर्वेज, ये बात ध्यान रखिएगा। 99.9% ऑफ दीज कैलकुलेशंस आर बेस्ड ऑन सर्वेज। हम सारी इकोनॉमी में सारे लोगों को नहीं मेजर करते हैं। हम क्या करते हैं, एक सैंपल बनाते हैं 1000, 2000, 5000, 10,000 लोगों का, और उसके बेसिस पे पूरी इकोनॉमी में जो भी चल रहा है वो बोल देते हैं। ठीक है, तो हमने 5 शहर पकड़े, 5 cities, 5 Tier 2 Tier 3 टाउन्स, और उनमें जो भी अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट का रेट चल रहा है उसके बेसिस पे we say that this is the unemployment or employment rate in the entire country. Okay, okay, टाइप्स ऑफ अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट पे आते हैं। देर इज सीजनल, डिस्गाइज्ड, ओपन, स्ट्रक्चरल, फ्रिक्शनल, साइक्लिकल, क्रॉनिक, कैजुअल, टेक्नोलॉजिकल। टोटल ऑफ 9 टाइप्स ऑफ अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट इन द कंट्री। वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन यहाँ से आ सकता है। सीजनल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट क्या होती है? सीजनल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट वो होती है जो कि किसी एक सीजन में एम्प्लॉयड हैं, दूसरे सीजन में एम्प्लॉयड नहीं है। वेरी सिंपल, एग्रीकल्चर इज मोस्ट ईजी टू अंडरस्टैंड सीजनल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट। एक और चीज़, आइसक्रीम पार्लर्स, आइसक्रीम की जो ठेली होती हैं वो, या फिर आइस पार्लर्स, आइस मैन्युफैक्चरर्स। अब गर्मी में तो यू नीड अ लॉट ऑफ आइस, बट इन विंटर्स नोबडी वांट्स आइस। तो जितने भी आइस मैन्युफैक्चरर्स हैं दे गो अंडरग्राउंड इन विंटर्स, दे स्टॉप वर्किंग, दे लुक फॉर अनदर वर्क इन विंटर्स। दैट इज व्हाट सीजनल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट। because of winters, because of weather change, they are unable to find work, so they are seasonally unemployed. Okay, एग्रीकल्चर में भी होता है कभी कभी। आप जैसे एग्रीकल्चर में क्या होता है, फार्मर ने खेती करी, सो किया, उसके बाद वो 3 महीने खाली है। 3 महीने बस सुबह सुबह 2 घंटे उसको जाके अपना खेत चेक करना है, जो भी प्रॉब्लम है वो सॉर्ट करनी है, उसके बाद वो खाली है पूरे दिन। So that is seasonal unemployment. The entire season for 2-3 months at a stretch he is lying idle. Okay. The second is disguised unemployment. Again, this is seen in agriculture also. the best way to understand disguised unemployment is, let's say there are 3 persons working on a job. If I remove one person out of this, the output will still remain the same, which means that the productivity or the contribution of this third person was actually zero. It may it had, they had he had no productive contribution, not because he's not skilled enough, but because the job doesn't require him out there anymore. रिक्वायरमेंट ही नहीं है इस थर्ड आदमी की, वो बस वहाँ पर है बिकॉज उसके पास कुछ और करने को नहीं है. सो दिस कॉल्ड डिस्गाइज्ड अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट when a person's productivity, marginal productivity in a job is zero, and even if that person was removed, there would be no difference, there would be no impact on the job. Okay. When a person's contribution to production process is minimal or redundant, marginal productivity is effectively zero. This is where a question can be asked from you in the examination कि marginal productivity जीरो होती है तो उसको कौन सा टाइप का अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट हम बोलते हैं. Then there is open unemployment where a significant portion of labor force is unable to find regular employment opportunities. Open unemployment ऐसा unemployment जहाँ पे खुलेआम unemployment हो रहा है. Majority portion of the labor force is not able to find regular employment. उनको थोड़ा थोड़ा बीच बीच में मिल जाता है बट रेगुलरली नहीं मिल रहा है. तो हम बोलते हैं कि यार ओपन अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट बहुत ज़्यादा है इस इंडस्ट्री में. तो पूरे देश में नहीं होता है, नॉर्मली इंडस्ट्री वाइज चलता है. स्ट्रक्चरल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट हैपन्स व्हेन there is something wrong with the economic structure of a country. When the economic structure of a country is messed up, then it results in structural unemployment. Okay, economic structure कब mess up होता है? For example, right now AI is coming in. What is going to happen because of AI? A lot of people will have skills that it already is happening, but will happen even more. Will have skills that will not be required anymore by the industry, by the companies. तो लोगों के पास skills तो हैं, but वो skills companies को चाहिए ही नहीं. क्यों नहीं चाहिए? क्योंकि वो skills का जो सारा काम है वो कंप्यूटर कर लेता है, AI सिस्टम कर लेता है. So there is a strong structural gap. जो आपको पढ़ाया जा रहा है कॉलेजेस में, स्कूल्स में, वो एक्चुअली इंडस्ट्री की रिक्वायरमेंट है ही नहीं. बिकॉज ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर रीजन, you are smart, maybe you are an intelligent person, but whatever you have been taught, whatever skills have been given to you, they're not relevant for the industry. You cannot get a job based on that. So it automatically results in structural unemployment. Okay, यहाँ पर दिया हुआ है skills mismatch. Okay, structural unemployment can also happen due to demand supply mismatch. Demand for labor falls short of the available supply due to rapid population growth. डिमांड कम है लेबर की, सप्लाई बहुत ज़्यादा है. इंडिया में भी ये होता है. आप अभी लेबर चौक चले जाओ, आपको देखेंगे वहाँ पे 100 लोग खड़े हुए. सप्लाई इतनी ज़्यादा है, 100 में से 2 4 5 लोग को लोग ले जाते हैं काम कराने के लिए, बाकी लोग वहीं खड़े रहते हैं. सो डिमांड फॉर लेबर इज़ लेस, सप्लाई ऑफ लेबर इज़ वेरी हाई, and this happens primarily due to high population growth rate. When that happens, that also results in structural unemployment. The structure of population in the economy has got messed up, is not balanced anymore. Skills mismatch में structure of education, the educational structure is not good in the economy, which is resulting in structural unemployment. Worker immobility happens when the workers are not able to move from one place to another. So it is basically geographical imbalance in the economy which results in structural unemployment. When there are people who are looking for work, willing to work, but these people can't move from one place to the other. It's not easy to move from one place to the other after a certain age, and because they can't do that, they're unable to find good enough or any kind of employment opportunities. Okay. Technology is also one reason which results in structural unemployment. The technology available in the country is very obsolete, but the technology required is very advanced, so that results in unemployment in the economy. Any kind of unemployment that results because of major structural issues in the economy. Structural issues matlab how the economy is, how the nation is structured. The nation is structured on the basis of population, education, technology, mobility, हेल्थ, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, ये सब प्लेटफॉर्म्स हैं जिनके बेसिस पे एक इकोनॉमी क्रिएट होती है. अगर इन सब प्लेटफॉर्म्स में कहीं ना कहीं छेद है, होल है, दे आर नॉट डूइंग वेल, देन दैट kind of unemployment becomes structural unemployment. अब let's say structural unemployment because the time that it takes to move from, let's say, Meerut to Delhi or Pune to Mumbai is too high because of infrastructure lags, और उसकी वजह से जो भी अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट हो रहा है दैट विल ऑल्सो बी स्ट्रक्चरल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. ओके. Frictional unemployment, when you are moving from one job to another, or you have been fired from a job and you're looking for another job. So there's a friction in your job because of some or the other reason, but it is temporary. That is called as frictional unemployment. Cyclical unemployment, because if the economy is going bust, if the economy is crashing, then unemployment because of that crash will be cyclical unemployment. If the economy is booming, the employment rise because of that boom will be cyclical employment. Okay. Now seasonal happens every year at the same time, but cyclical happens because of economic cycles of boom or bust. That is the major difference between cyclical and seasonal. There is chronic unemployment. जब अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट बहुत लंबे टाइम तक चलती रहती है तो उसको हम क्रॉनिक बोल देते हैं. क्रॉनिक मतलब बहुत डेस्परेट, इंटेंस, लॉन्ग, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज क्रॉनिक. जैसे क्रॉनिक डिजीज, ऐसा डिजीज जो बहुत लंबे टाइम से चला आ रहा है, क्रॉनिक डिजीज. सो क्रॉनिक अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट इज अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट दैट इज बीन इन द इकोनॉमी फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम पीरियड बिकॉज ऑफ, इट माइट बी स्ट्रक्चरल फ्लॉज, इट माइट बी एनी काइंड ऑफ फ्लॉज. ओके. नाउ ये समझना ज़रूरी है कि जितने भी टाइप्स हैं अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट के, दीज आर नॉट इन साइलोज, दे आर ऑल्सो कनेक्टेड विद ईच अदर. ठीक है ना. सो अ स्ट्रक्चरल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट कैन ऑल्सो बी seasonal, can also be chronic. Okay, they can be a mix of each other as well. Technological, AI is the best example. जो भी unemployment create होगी because of technological changes, that is called as technological. Casual unemployment, when people start getting employed on a casual basis. For example, what is happening right now, the gig economy that is coming up, that is resulting in a lot of casual unemployment because there are often no contracts, no permanent employment. People also don't want that. तो आपने एक महीने काम किया, बहुत पैसा कमाया, उसके बाद आप 2 महीने के लिए अनएम्प्लॉयड हो. दैट इज कैजुअल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. ओके. इंडिया में अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट कैसा है? इंडिया में देयर हैज बीन अ लॉट ऑफ there is ruralization, which means revitalization of rural areas by opportunities for younger generations or jobs in agricultural activities. The percentage of labor force engaged in agriculture has increased to 46.5% in 1920 from 2018-19. So people are, और ये especially it happened more immediately after COVID. Why? Because agriculture became very lucrative, prices of agricultural products increased, and people went back to their own homes, so they started working ultimately in their own homes. So this ruralization we saw heavily during COVID, but I feel that it is reversing again because the opportunities in rural areas are reducing yet again. Okay. But because urban areas, the urban centers have become so difficult to live in. They're out of reach of people, lot of people. So these people have started going into tier 2 cities. So tier 2 cities have started growing very fast. So it will not be called as ruralization specifically, but it will be called as tier 2 level growth or semi-urbanization. There can be some other term for it. Okay. But this is what is happening. We saw ruralization specifically at the time of COVID-19 and after that. But right now we are seeing something called as semi-urbanization kind of employment, unemployment and employment. Masculinization, even after so many years of independence, we see that periodic labor force survey says that female labor force participation rate is still very low, which tells us that a lot of men are working, but educated women are still not working. Okay. Casualization, you see that around you all the time right now. I see that very clearly amongst the Gen Z. They are happy working as casual workers. They don't want security, safety, stability. They're not looking for those things. They're fine with working as casual workers. Uh, you work for a month, you don't work for another 2 months, you're okay with that. Okay, that is what they're doing. So that is called as casualization of workforce, where stable, long-term social security based jobs are vanishing. Challenges of casualization, मेजर चैलेंजेस कि लोगों का एक्सप्लॉयटेशन ज़्यादा होता है, अनफेयर ट्रीटमेंट ज़्यादा होता है, एंड इट ऑल्सो keeps pushing people into poverty and keeps pulling people out of poverty. So a person, if he's employed for 4 months straight on a contract, gets rich, and immediately after that, if he doesn't get work for a year, he's poor again. He can be rich again, he'll be poor again. So it keeps pushing people into and out of poverty. That is a major challenge of casualization. Okay. Casualization and informalization are different, a little different. Casualization is when people are uh, fine with working on a contract basis, but informalization means that when you're working in the informal sector, the sector is also informal, and you are not provided any kind of social security, any kind of benefits at all. You're not even probably on contract. So that is informalization of workforce. Casualization is more connected with gig economy, but informalization is more connected with keeping people employed but not giving them permanent employment when they want permanent employment. So informalization is normally involuntary kind of casualization, but casualization is voluntary. People look for casual works themselves, but people never want to work in an informal sector, in an informal, as a part of informal labor force. Okay. In India, majority of labor force is actually working in the informal sector, and the problem here is the government is also following the same. You will see that the government is hiring heavily on contract basis, especially in Group C, Group D services. They're hiring heavily on contract basis. So in the government, even the government has figured that informalization is good for it. It's cheaper. It does not, put the government in a tight spot where it has to give social security benefits and it has to keep people on roll all the time. So in the government is also on the same path. Okay. अब अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट होता क्या है? द मेजर रीज़न बिहाइंड अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट इन इंडिया हैज़ बीन दिस जॉबलेस ग्रोथ. हमारी इकोनॉमी में ग्रोथ तो हुई है, बट उस ग्रोथ की वजह से एम्प्लॉयमेंट अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ या एम्प्लॉयमेंट उतना जनरेट हुआ नहीं है जितना होना चाहिए था. डॉक्टर अमर्त्य सेन केम आउट विद दिस concept called as, along with Jean Reyes, they came out with this concept together of jobless growth. This is a major cause of unemployment in India. We have grown, but that growth has not resulted in enough employment. Why has that happened? Majorly because our growth has been more concentrated in the services sector. सर्विस सेक्टर ने ग्रोथ तो दे दिया अपने को, इकोनॉमी में ग्रोथ तो हुआ, जीडीपी तो बढ़ा, प्रोडक्शन बढ़ा, बट उस प्रोडक्शन की वजह से बहुत ज़्यादा एम्प्लॉयमेंट नहीं बढ़ा. जो बंदा पहले 10 घंटे में एक कोड बना लेता था, अब वो 10 घंटे में 2 भी कोड बना लेता है बिकॉज एफिशिएंट हो गया. बट दैट डज नॉट हैपन इन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग. इन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, इफ देर इज ग्रोथ, then the level of employment that increases is also higher. But India has not been able to grow in manufacturing to that extent. We have limited our growth majorly to service sector, and that is why we have grown, but we have not seen enough employment coming out of that growth. So that has been the major cause of jobless growth in India. Okay. और भी बहुत सारे रीजंस हैं. एग्रीकल्चर पे हमारा बहुत ज़्यादा अभी भी pressure है in terms of employment, and our agriculture has not grown Our agriculture is majorly rain fed. It has not grown, it has not become advanced to the level that it should have. Capital formation उतना नहीं है, which means investment in the economy is not that much जितना होना चाहिए था. Because of that also, we are not seeing enough employment opportunities. Okay, lot of companies have moved to capital intensive techniques. पहले कंपनीज लेबर से काम कराती थी, फिर उनको रियलाइज़ हुआ यार ये बड़ा मुश्किल है लेबर से काम कराना, एंड द गवर्नमेंट्स लेबर लॉज आर ऑल्सो वेरी हैवी, वेरी डिफिकल्ट, वेरी एंटी अस, सो वी कैन डू दैट फॉर एवर. तो कंपनी स्टार्टेड एम्प्लॉइंग मोर कैपिटल इंटेंसिव टेक्निक्स, जिससे कि उसको लेबर के पछड़े में पड़ना ही ना पड़े. सो दैट हैज़ रिजल्टेड इन ग्रोथ, बट दैट ग्रोथ हैज़ नॉट ब्रॉट अबाउट हायर एम्प्लॉयमेंट. हमारा एजुकेशन सिस्टम उतना क्लीन नहीं है, जिसकी वजह से लोगों की स्किल्स उतनी अच्छी नहीं है, लोगों की एम्प्लॉयबिलिटी नहीं है. तो कहीं ना कहीं से ग्रोथ तो आ रही है, बट लोग जिनको एम्प्लॉयमेंट मिलना चाहिए था उनको मिल नहीं पाता, क्योंकि उनकी स्किल अच्छी नहीं है. ओके, तो बहुत सारी जॉब्स जो हैं वो आउटसोर्स भी हो जाती हैं. ओके, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट सर्विस में एनएसएसओ सर्वे, दीज आर नॉट वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, बट आई थिंक यहाँ फैक्ट्स इंपॉर्टेंट है, तो पढ़ सकते हो अपने आप. एनएसएसओ सर्वे है, एक साल एक बार होता है 5 साल में. And remember that it is a survey, so it is not we are not calculating data of the entire country, we are using a survey, और उसके बेसिस पे हम करते हैं. NSSO conducts periodic labor force survey 2017 से. तो जो latest periodic labor force survey, please read that, it is there in the course. वहाँ से एक दो questions आ सकते हैं. Okay. National Statistical Office was formed in 2019 by merging NSSO and CSO. So Central Statistics Office, National Sample Survey Office, ये दोनों को combine करके हमने NSO एक organization बनाई, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation के अंदर. And now this NSO carries out all kinds of major surveys in India, including employment survey also. Okay. अगर occupational structure देखें तो 42% people are employed in primary sector, 32% in services sector, and about 25% in secondary sector. Okay. गवर्नमेंट स्कीम्स, हम जब स्कीम्स पढ़ेंगे तो अलग से पढ़ेंगे, तो ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है. एम्प्लॉयमेंट इलास्टिसिटी क्या होती है? एम्प्लॉयमेंट इलास्टिसिटी मतलब अगर इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ 5% से 6% हुई, तो हमारा एम्प्लॉयमेंट रेट कितना परसेंटेज बढ़ा, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज एम्प्लॉयमेंट इलास्टिसिटी. सो देयर इज अ 1% increase in economic growth. If there is a 1% or more than 1% increase in employment, not unemployment, तो हम बोलेंगे employment elasticity is positive. If the economic growth increases by 1%, but employment increases by let's say 0.8% vis-a-vis last year, then we'll say employment elasticity is less than 1, और inelastic बोल देंगे हम उसको. ठीक है. इलास्टिसिटी ऑफ 1, वैल्यू ऑफ 0 मतलब कोई चेंज नहीं हुआ एम्प्लॉयमेंट में, और डिक्लाइनिंग एम्प्लॉयमेंट इलास्टिसिटी मतलब इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ बढ़ा बट एम्प्लॉयमेंट और भी कम हो गई, तो हम उसको बोलेंगे कि यार आप नेगेटिव या फिर इन इलास्टिक इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ टू एम्प्लॉयमेंट रेशो आपका है. ओके. India's employment elasticity has decreased over time, which tells us that although we are getting economic growth, but that economic growth is not resulting in higher employment in the country, जो हमें जॉबलेस ग्रोथ पे ही लेके जाता है, घुमा फिरा के हम वहीं जा रहे हैं. ठीक है. अभी हमारा 2004-5 to 11-12 is 0.04, which means 1% change in economic growth has resulted in 0.04% change in employment, which is very bad. Okay, almost nil. तो ये एम्प्लॉयमेंट इलास्टिसिटी क्यों कम है? मेजरली इसीलिए कम है, वही जॉबलेस ग्रोथ की वजह से ही कम है. तो ग्रोथ तो हो रही है, वो जॉबलेसनेस है, लेकिन उसमें ऑटोमेशन, टेक्नोलॉजी हो गया. एग्रीकल्चर पे अभी भी फोकस है, लेकिन एग्रीकल्चर अभी भी एम्प्लॉयमेंट देता है, बट एग्रीकल्चर इज़ नॉट कंट्रीब्यूटिंग टू ग्रोथ. स्किल्स मिसमैच है. एफडीआई जो भी आता है वो कैपिटल इंटेंसिव सेक्टर में लग जाता है, तो ग्रोथ तो वो देता है बट एम्प्लॉयमेंट नहीं जनरेट करता. ओके. लास्ट इज फिलिप्स कर्व. फिलिप्स कर्व इज दिस. Phillips curve shows the relationship between inflation and unemployment. According to Phillips curve, जैसे जैसे इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ता है एक इकोनॉमी के अंदर, जैसे जैसे इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ता है एक इकोनॉमी के अंदर, वैसे वैसे हमारा अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट कम होता है। एंड जैसे जैसे इन्फ्लेशन कम होता है इकोनॉमी के अंदर, हमारा अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ता है। लोअर अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट एसोसिएटेड विद हायर इन्फ्लेशन। ओके, सो इट अकॉर्डिंग टू फिलिप्स कर्व, इन्फ्लेशन एंड अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट हैव अ स्टेप इनवर्स रिलेशनशिप। मतलब अगर एक इकोनॉमी में एम्प्लॉयमेंट ज़्यादा है, एक इकोनॉमी में एम्प्लॉयमेंट ज़्यादा है, तो इन्फ्लेशन भी बढ़ेगा। एम्प्लॉयमेंट ज़्यादा है मतलब अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट कम है। तो एक इकोनॉमी में जब एम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ता है तो इन्फ्लेशन भी बढ़ता है। अब ये कैसे होता है, मैं आपको एक एग्जांपल देके समझाता हूँ। लेट्स से एक इकोनॉमी में हमने एम्प्लॉयमेंट किसी तरह से बढ़ाया, इंक्रीज हुआ। जब एम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ेगा, आफ्टर अ वाइल wages of people will start rising, or at least the demand for wages will start rising. When this happens, then the cost of goods which are being produced will increase. When the cost of goods increases, तो हमने क्या किया था, हमने सबसे पहले एम्प्लॉयमेंट दिया लोगों को। जब हमने एम्प्लॉयमेंट दिया लोगों को तो उनकी धीरे धीरे 1 साल 2 साल में वेजेस की डिमांड बढ़ी। वेजेस की डिमांड बढ़ी, कॉस्ट ऑफ गुड्स बढ़ी। कॉस्ट ऑफ गुड्स बढ़ी तो फाइनल प्राइस ऑफ गुड्स बढ़ना शुरू हुआ, तो इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ गया। ये एक रिलेशनशिप हो गया। दूसरा, जब हमने एम्प्लॉयमेंट दिया लोगों को तो इनकी डिमांड बढ़ी खर्च करने की, बिकॉज दे गोइंग टू कंज्यूम, कमा रहे हैं तो खर्च करेंगे ना। So the demand of goods and services increase. When they start demanding more, overall demand in the economy increases. When overall demand in the economy increases, what is going to happen? Inflation is going to go up. Okay. Through a lot of researches, further clarifications, हमने ये डिसप्रूव भी किया हुआ है कि यार फिलिप्स कर्व डजंट वर्क एनी मोर, बट इन लॉट ऑफ सिचुएशंस इट एक्चुअली वर्क्स ऑल्सो। अभी भी कई सिचुएशंस में काम करता है, कई सिचुएशंस में काम नहीं करता है। ओके, जब अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ता है तो इन्फ्लेशन कम होता है इकोनॉमी के अंदर। क्यों होता है भाई? अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ा, लोगों के पास पैसा ही नहीं है, लोग खाली बैठे हुए हैं, तो वो क्या ही खरीदेंगे, क्या ही खाएंगे। व्हेन दे स्टार्ट डिमांडिंग लेस, देन ऑटोमेटिकली इन्फ्लेशन स्टार्ट्स डिक्रीजिंग इन द इकोनॉमी। ओके, ठीक है। दिस ब्रिंग्स अस टू द एंड ऑफ चैप्टर नंबर 3 विच इज अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट। तो आज हम लोगों ने क्या क्या कर लिया? हमने इन्फ्लेशन कर लिया, मनी कर लिया और अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट कर लिया। ओके, let's pick up tomorrow. Tomorrow let's try and have a session early in the morning, probably 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. We can have two sessions also. 8 to 10 we can have a session, and then 11 to 2 we can have another session. So 8 to 10 we can have a session of we can cover the entire fiscal policy, public debt, and federal finance. And 11 to 2 we can cover Indian tax system एंड रेगुलेटरी बॉडीज़, बैंकिंग सिस्टम, जो भी हम उठा पाएंगे फिर हम वो कवर करने की कोशिश करेंगे। ओके, सो वी कैन ट्राई एंड डू दैट इन द टुमारो। वी कैन हैव टू सेशंस, one in the morning 8 to 10 and another one from 11 to 2. We can have two sessions tomorrow. Wednesday है, हमारे पास टाइम रहेगा तो हम खींच सकते हैं काफ़ी सारा। ओके, is that all right with all the students who are sitting right here? Okay, so let's do that. So today we are done with chapter 2 and chapter 3. Tomorrow we'll pick up chapter 4, 5, 6. ये हम 2 घंटे में cover कर लेंगे. And if we spend another 2.5 to 3 hours, we can probably cover taxation. Taxation is not so long. We can cover taxation and a part of regulatory bodies. Then Thursday we can pick things up again. We can have 2 sessions, 2 hours, 3 hours. We'll be able to cover things in a more smooth manner in that ways. Okay, चलिए, so close करते हैं आज का session. That's all for today. Yes, we need to have longer sessions. We can have multiple sessions. 2 घंटे 3 घंटे के दो 3 session कर लेंगे, तो we'll be able to solve this and we'll be able to complete. Okay, I don't want to run. I want to make sure that whatever is being taught properly. अभी भी मैं थोड़ा सा तेज़ भाग रहा हूँ. I need to be slower, but I have to do it because we are already running short. But I would rather have more sessions rather than running too fast in the course. That will not be very fruitful. So let's have two sessions tomorrow. I'll tell my team 8 o'clock one session, and then 11 o'clock another session. Okay. No, there is no option of only mentorship. Mentorship, I feel, is a part of the course, because otherwise it becomes very useless, very limited, effective. In any scenario, every week I provide mentorship to students in the classes. If you need any kind of mentorship, you can reach out to me also. You can tell my team, the number is there on the website. आप उनको reach out करिए, उनको बोलिए अनुज सर से बात करनी है. They will allocate a time and date, and you will be able to talk with me. ठीक है ना? But with the enrolled students, I sit every Sunday and we discuss things in greater lengths. चलिए, that's all for today. I'll see you again tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock and then again at 11 o'clock. Bye bye.